Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, César García Hernández, author of Welcome the Wretched, in defense of the criminal alien. And later in the program, writer Schuyler Mitchell will be with us to talk about Israel's pinkwashing tactics. Also on the program today, at UCLA... Is this song slower than normal? Okay, never mind. Also on the program today, at UCLA, cops fire impact munitions on college kids protesting Israel's genocide, allowing pro-Israel counter-demonstrators to violently attack them as well. Blinken was in Israel yesterday, and despite reports of supposed optimism about a ceasefire, Netanyahu is still insisting on a catastrophic Rafah invasion, where 600,000 children are. Jordan says Israeli settlers are attacking aid trucks again. The country of Colombia announces it will sever diplomatic ties with Israel. It's funny, it's funny time for this Colombia to do that. Right?
Colombia.
Yes. The House's BS anti-Semitism bill, which says that criticizing Israel's anti-Semitic, passes overwhelmingly with only 91 no votes in the House. In Arizona, 2 state Senate Republicans joined all Democrats to repeal the 1864 abortion ban, leaving the 15-week one in place. However, some weird legislative rules means the full ban will still take effect for a short period of time in the summer. In South Dakota, organizers say they have enough signatures to put abortion on the ballot in November. On his day off from his criminal trial, the law and order candidate Trump campaigned in Wisconsin, praising cop raids on pro-Palestine protesters. You know, the criminal defendant law and order candidate. Senate Democrats reintroduce a bill to legalize cannabis. Another Boeing whistleblower has died. He was 45. The NLRB determines Amazon CEO broke labor law by saying employees would be less empowered by joining a union. And lastly, hundreds dead in Kenya after massive floods due to downpours strike the country, and landslides as well, decimating homes. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is an EmMajority Report Thursday. I am joined now by Bradley and Matt, and later in the program, old Matt and Brandon will be with us. So that will be fun for the fun half. Brandon is with us today, right? So that's good. Yeah. We'll, of course, be talking about what's on all of our minds. And we'll start there as well. So earlier today, so I guess it was, in the early AM hours in California time, the LAPD, wearing riot gear, violently attacked the pro-Palestine encampment at UCLA. They used flashbangs. They fired impact munitions on these kids. That includes rubber bullets. Let's show what a rubber bullet looks like. Because, it's not as... it can really... Rubber bullets have killed people, and rubber bullets are extremely painful when fired on you. This is Lee Hurley from Ireland. Hello from Northern Ireland, where the Brits love to use rubber bullets. Rubber bullets kill. This is what a rubber bullet looks like. Now imagine that fired at you from a gun. And if you're listening on the podcast audience, you can see that these rubber bullets are as large as a human being's hand, if not bigger. So they're significant. And the footage of that getting fired on these kids who were just standing against genocide was horrifying.
It's fascism.
Yeah, and it really undercuts the democracy is under attack kind of theme from Biden's campaign.
This is Project 2024. The whole anti-Semitism is criticism of Israel bullshit. This is all fascism in our country right now, and it does not matter who is in the White House about it.
Well, I mean, isn't that the kind of the saying about liberals? If you scratch a little bit and there's a fascist underneath.
Yeah, I mean, they don't care about it except as a way to campaign on.
It's really, I think, an education, too, for a lot of young people in Gen Z. These kids who are so brave and are insisting that stop making it about the campus protests. Listen to what we're saying about divestment and listen to what we're saying about this genocide ahead of a potentially catastrophic Rafah ground invasion, which they've already been bombing, by the way. But over 1 million Palestinians are displaced there, and the UN estimates that 600,000 children are in Rafah, just to give you a sense of what that slaughter would look like. But in terms of what happened early this morning at UCLA, The Guardian writes, footage showed mostly male counter-demonstrators, many of them masked, and some apparently older than the students. I saw women as young as 18 and 19 punched in the face by 25 or 30-year-old men, Aidan Doyle, a member of the student encampment, said at a student press conference on Wednesday. Students described being attacked for hours with projectiles, fireworks, and chemical agents. A young woman in a hijab described being sprayed in the face with bear mace. A student who identified himself only as Yusef said at the press conference that he had been hit in the head twice during the attack on the encampment and was left with stitches on his forehead and 14 staples in the back of his head. But Yusef said he felt comparatively lucky. I had the ability to go to a hospital last night. Currently in Gaza, there are 0 fully functioning hospitals. I mean, these young people are remarkable and on the right side of history.
It's the night after Zionists attacked them too. Fascist brown shirt Zionists attack the same encampment, and now cops do it. It's the same. This is fascism. I mean, as the living memory of fascism recedes, Zionism will take its place, and it's going to be the new thing that we all realize is completely against humanity years down the line, and we will defeat this the same way fascism was defeated.
And the propaganda to protect this is really in overtime, right? Doing overtime right now. That's a little bit of a
doing overtime. What, like, are they on Candy Crush?
Right, well, that's what I'm saying. Time and a half to stand in a subway station or crack the skull of kids standing up to one of the worst crimes against humanity that we will ever live through. So, like, the media is just constantly misrepresenting the level of danger presented by these protesters, which is 0. It's the provocateurs, these pro-Israel Zionists, people who are going in there with the explicit purpose of creating violence and sowing discontent, and then the national press will be like, oh my gosh, these are not peaceful protests. Well, who are the people creating lack of peace? And by the way, peace, that's what liberals and conservatives desire. We want justice.
It's insincere. The idea that vandalism is all of a sudden the thing that the issue. No, these fascists were looking for a license. Rabbi Soav was talking about them being anti-Jewish days before because they couldn't actually point to any sort of vandalism because all they're looking for is a license to put this down. Like all the talk about, was it outside agitators? Oh, guess what? Those were all students. So what were you even talking about outside agitators for? Is it okay now that they're all students? No, you still want them arrested because you're a fascist and you would have want the people occupying the lunch counters to be arrested. You are fascists.
Well, speaking of those outside agitator claims, this is Mayor Eric Adams when asked about that specific accusation. And the outside agitator, because obviously the images out of the Columbia protest will be in history books for centuries to come. But this outside agitator myth, one, it's made to make it seem like these are inorganic and the kids don't have a justification for what they're doing. But outside agitators, I saw Astra Taylor had this great point. it's a way to undercut movements because solidarity from the outside is essential for these children, these not children, but young people right now. And this is Eric Adams being asked about his claims that outside agitators are at these Columbia demonstrations, and he really can't come up with anything.
By all this, but we've heard from your team that there are these nameless leaders who were involved. Can you tell us who they were, or at least how many of them there are?
Well, first, I always suspected that something was happening, and I'm happy that the confirmation of my suspicion turned out to be accurate when our intelligence division briefed me on two particular individuals. One of them, husband, was arrested for terrorism as well. Some of the paraphernalia and pamphlets that we saw, individuals we saw who were not CUNY students, were there training individuals. We saw the escalation of the tactics that were being used. And so it has been reported on some of the individuals that just stated. I choose not to give notoriety to people who participate in activities like that, but it has been online. The police department has reported, and I'm sure if you reach out to the intelligence division, they'll give you based on the information we want to release. And this is extremely active, continue to evolve.
Sorry, pause. I don't know how much more you want to go on this, but that will be the information we want to believe is a fun Freudian sleep for receipt or release.
Yeah, right. There's 4 more seconds. We'll let him finish. No, it's okay.
Continue to do the thorough investigations that we have been doing.
Okay, very thorough. So
Boink.
The person that one of the people that he references most specifically there, this is the obviously the communists over at the Associated Press. Jake Offenhartz, who is a New York City-based reporter for the APM, obviously being tongue-in-cheek, says, for the 4th time today, Adams describes Nala al-Aryan as an outside agitator, this time in response to a question about the nameless leaders he claims are behind the protest. Her actual role, stopping by the encampment with her daughters last week.
Yeah, and I will just say Jake Offenhartz has been doing good reporting, so there's not a whole lot of people out there, especially for big organizations, so follow Jake.
Yeah, good job, Jake at the AP. That he could barely come up with anything there.
Because it was insincere. It was a lie the whole time, and they knew it.
Yeah, and then here's another lie. This is the NYPD deputy commissioner going on Morning Joe, which is Biden's favorite show. He watches it religiously, and he's talking here about some of the tactics that are being used by these students and who's funding them. We'll have an answer for you after this.
Right.
Tell us about this change.
Yeah, so when we entered Hamilton Hall, this is not what students bring to school. Okay, this is what professionals bring to campuses and universities. These are heavy industrial chains that were locked with bike locks, and this is what we encountered on every door inside of Hamilton Hall. And so in order for our emergency services group to enter into the building, they had to first cut through these chains, but also get rid of debris and barricaded doors that were barricaded with refrigerators, vending machines, chairs, you name it. Awesome. They pushed it up against those doors to try and stop us from coming in. But our guys would not be stopped. They did a fantastic job of entering into that location and taking people into custody without incident last night. They took about 40 to 50 people into custody inside of the lobby of Hamilton Hall last night.
Tell us about this.
So that a scary, scary bike lock.
The Hamas chain.
Right.
They make those at the foundry in Gaza.
Why do all the tents look the same? Too. Well, it's like a kid maybe ordered them in bulk off Amazon or something like that. And these scary bike locks, wow, look at the Columbia University Hamas headquarters.
Hamas has infiltrated Columbia University public safety with special terrorism locks.
Yeah, so Arik Toller, who works at the Times, says that this bike lock is and was available for sale on campus via Columbia's public safety department under their crime prevention discount bike locker and laptop.
It is the most expensive one here, the Kryptonite New York series. In fact, weird. It's not the Kryptonite Gaza or Kryptonite Intifada series. It's the But
you can see there's a sleeve on the chain there, and there wasn't when he put that very heavy chain onto the morning desk
That's a special thing that makes it dangerous.
The Morning Joe desk, yeah, right. Yeah. So we know exactly what this is.
Yeah, this is Colin Powell holding up an anthrax vial saying we got to kill 100,000 Iraqis. This is the same thing.
They're incredibly frustrated by the effectiveness of these demonstrations. And this coverage on MSNBC, this supposed liberal news outlet, is completely out of whack with public opinion, let alone Democrats. I mean, over 75% of Democrats disapprove of Israel's actions in Gaza, and there hasn't been specific polling about support for these demonstrations. I don't know if it would be as strong, just given the fact that people see discord and they generally get kind of what were you saying?
They're being lied to about it by Zionists and media like Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough.
Right. They generally, people don't support protests in the way that they think that they should. But in terms of support for Israel, like the level of support, disapproval from Democrats is overwhelming. And the last major poll that was done by Gallup found a massive shift in public opinion, and that disapproval of Israel's actions is the majority opinion at 55%. And approval had dropped from November to March from 50 to 36%. Yeah. So the point is just that who is this for, right? This is just an appeal to power because the American public, this is only going to continue to go down this road as people begin to educate themselves about Palestine and about Israel.
The college Democrats said, hey, our votes aren't to be taken for granted. Official college Democrats never make statements like that.
Oh, yeah. Please. I was in high school Democrats and a little bit involved in college Democrats, but my politics got a bit better then. It's as establishment as it gets. Biden's remarks, we didn't have an opportunity to really watch them because they happened right before the show, but it appears to echo something similar to this.
Sputtering brain dead moron.
Yeah, this disconnect is between public opinion and the way that the corporate press like this is covering this is staggering. And they are just immensely frustrated at how good these kids are at protesting, how they learn so many lessons from Occupy. Like, we're going to have a spokesperson and not have you talk to some random person who may say something that you can grab and smear the whole movement with. They have hierarchies. They are militant. They are clear in their demands as well. And Jewish students are also overrepresented in these demonstrations as well and encampments. So they're looking for anything, and they will fail. They will fail. It's just how many Palestinians will starve to death? Will the Rafah invasion, will that be allowed to happen? We can't. We can't allow it. How many will die as we pretend that it's like kids getting brainwashed by TikTok? Time is of the essence. And so don't waste your time on any of these distractions about policing, both literally and with their language, the actions by these righteous kids. All right, folks, we're going to take a break in a second, but first we have a word from our sponsors. Did you know that Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the United States with more than 10,000 different kinds of plants and over 2 million happy customers in the U.S.? They have everything you could possibly want, like fruit trees, palm trees, evergreens, houseplants, and so much more. Whatever you're interested in, they have it for you. Find the perfect fit for your climate and space. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped directly to your door in 1 to 2 days. And along with their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, they offer free plant consultation forever. Now, I don't have a very green thumb, but I do like to have some life in my apartment, so I have a house plant from Fast Growing Trees, and they shipped it right to me, and it was really easy for me to pot it and put, I followed the instructions with their care, and it's going strong on my bookshelf. But Sam is just like Fast Growing Trees for everything. I mean, he's got fruit trees, he's got those bloomerangs, he swears by it. And they're not faster growing. They're just, they come a little bit more further down the line, so you can have the fruits of your tree and see the growth in your tree a little bit earlier.
Pre-grown.
You don't need to have a yard or a lot of space. You can grow lemon, avocado, olive, or fig trees inside your home on top of the wide variety of houseplants available. The experts at Fast Growing Trees curate thousands of plants so you can find the perfect fit for your specific climate, location, and needs. You don't have to drive around to nurseries and big gardening centers. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped to your door in 1 to 2 days. Whether you're looking to add some privacy, shade, or natural beauty to your yard, Fast Growing Trees has in-house experts ready to help you make the right selection with growing and care advice available 24/7. You can talk to a plant expert about your soil type, landscape design, how to take care of your plants, and everything else you need. No green thumb required. This spring, they have the best deals online, up to half off select plants and other deals. And listeners to our show can get an additional 15% off their first purchase when using the code MAJORITY at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using code MAJORITY at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code MAJORITY. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. And lastly, everybody knows I'm a big cashew fan. This is well established on this program. And
lore.
It is. It's got. I have achieved that. My cashew fixation has achieved that status. I do think that that's true. And then my go-to for my cashew fix, nuts.com. Please join me in thanking nuts.com for supporting the Majority Report. Right now, when you go to nuts.com/majority, new customers get a free gift with purchase and free shipping on orders of $29 or more. Nuts.com is your one-stop shop for freshly roasted nuts, dried fruits, sweets, pantry staples like specialty flours, and more. Their wide selection means there is something for everyone. Nuts.com offers plenty of gluten-free options, organic choices, and other diet-friendly products. Whether you're looking for something sweet, savory, or need to stock up on everyday cooking essentials, you're bound to find something to try. At Nuts.com, quality is a top priority. They roast their nuts and pop their corn the same day it ships, so they reach you deliciously fresh. Satisfaction is guaranteed. Shop a la carte at any time or opt into hassle-free auto deliveries so you never run out of your favorite items. And if you're already stocked up at home, they also sell directly to businesses and have a bunch of great gift options. Right now, Nuts.com is offering new customers a free gift with purchase and free shipping on orders of $29 or more. Nuts.com/majority. So go check out all their delicious options at nuts.com/majority. You'll receive a free gift and free shipping when you spend $29 or more. That's nuts.com/majority. All right, guys, quick break, and then we'll be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by César García Hernández, Gregory H. Williams Chair of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties at the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law, immigration lawyer, author of Welcome the Wretched in Defense of the Criminal Alien. César, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
It's my pleasure to be here, Emma.
So, you've talked about this, and I never thought of it this way. The idea that migrants in the United States are either portrayed as criminals. I mean, I've thought about that part, right, by the Republicans and by reactionaries, and honestly, some Democrats too, but also then as victims, right, by other members of the political class. And your book seeks to portray them as people. Why did you choose to kind of take that perspective?
Well, the book Welcome the Wretched seeks to portray migrants as the whole people that they are. They are always people, no matter how often politicians like to dehumanize or to simplify their lives. They're full of complexities, they're full of contradictions, and in that sense, they're exactly the same as U.S. citizens, and that's the point of the book. It doesn't matter that our flaws and our imperfections are not a result of what country we are born in or where it is that we identify ourselves as citizens of, but in fact, but instead are a result of the fact that all of us will inevitably mess up, even though most of us spend most of our days trying to do right by the people around us and trying to rise to our better versions of ourselves.
Right, and I mean, this kind of trope about criminals, migrants as criminals, right? It's replaced more old school racism that maybe would have come in the form of slurs back in the day when, say, Italians or Jewish people were discriminated against by our immigration system. Now it's just, they're bringing crime. Can you talk a bit about that transition from those identifiable racist tropes to now this one that we're living through at this moment?
Yeah, there was a very a sizable shift that happened starting in the middle of the 1980s when the Reagan administration started to develop and trying to sell to the nation a war on drugs, specifically and as part of that political goal, and as part of the push to get law enforcement officials behind the Reagan administration's decision to target illicit drug activity, we started to talk about migrants as being the source of those problems that the Reagan administration was locating in big cities around the United States. Those drugs had to come from somewhere. It was the idea, and they were coming from places in South America and the Caribbean. They were being brought to the United States by migrants, by people whose principal goal, if not their only reason for coming to the United States, was to engage in illegal activity, in criminal activity. In that sense, it's not all that different from some of the rhetoric that we hear from politicians today. But it did catch on in the 1980s with Republicans, and then in the 1990s under the Clinton administration, when and among fairly influential members of the Democratic Party in Congress, including folks like then Senator Joe Biden, who of course now occupies the White House.
And echoes that very similar rhetoric. I mean, even Obama's approach when trying to tackle immigration as president was about basically his deportations targeting criminals and not law-abiding people. What's your assessment of Obama's role in this kind of just swell of treating migration as a criminal problem?
President Obama famously announced in 2014 that his administration was going to revamp immigration policy, and it was targeting, as he put it, felons, not families. He went on to say, we're going to go after gang members, not the mother who's trying to get her kids to school. As if, of course, felons are not parts of families, and families do not include felons, right? As if people exist in these binaries. You're either good or you're bad. You're fit for life in the United States because you avoid crime. But if you engage in criminal activity, then you have no right to remain in this country. When of course we don't have to look far beyond our families and friend networks, the latest news stories, to know that our country is full of people whose activities run the gamut, from the best versions of themselves to the worst versions of themselves. And I think that the President Obama has been true of Democratic administrations, presidential administrations, going back to the 1990s, is very much wrapped themselves in the idea that one run-in with the criminal legal system is one too many, and that in the political triangulation of immigration politics, it makes sense to sell the targeting of migrants who have criminal activity on their records as being the chip that is going to woo voters or woo Republicans to the negotiation table. And at least when it comes to Republicans in Washington, we've seen time and time again that no matter how much Democrats are willing to move in their direction, Republicans are pretty steadfast in their unwillingness to go along with them.
Well, to me, it's this kind of weaponization of the law or the legal system as a disciplinary tool for people who employ undocumented folks, right? Where it's essentially like you can use this looming threat of deportation in order to keep your workers quiet in some instances. And we know that Republicans represent capitalists, bosses, people who you enjoy having that point of leverage, honestly, on some employees.
Yeah, but I think this is something that we have to remember. Democrats are also supportive of the very law that created the federal government's power to decide who gets to work in the United States and who doesn't. That comes to us from 1986 when Reagan was president. It was a product of an important political compromise in which Republicans got those employer sanctions. But Democrats got a pretty wide-reaching amnesty component to that law. And these days, there's some wiggle room in that law that Democratic or that activists are trying to push Democratic-led states and cities to tap, because that law explicitly says that it applies to private employers and it applies to federal government agencies, barring those two from hiring people who don't have the federal government's permission to work in the United States. But it says nothing about whether it applies to states and local governments. And folks in California are trying to push the UC system. Folks in Denver are trying to push the city to hire migrants who have no work authorization from the United States as a way of helping those communities bring into the fold and into the labor market some of the folks who have arrived in recent months, courtesy of this busing program that Greg Abbott in Texas has been leading for many months now.
You wrote about how in the 1970s Congress passed a law restoring Robert E. Lee's full citizenship. And that is a contrast to basically saying we don't want criminals in this country to be citizens. Can you just talk to our audience about that contrast a bit?
Yeah, when Congress realized that Robert E. Lee had never been fully pardoned after leading the military insurrection that tried to destroy literally the United States of America. In the 1970s, Congress says, "Well, we can do something about it. We can restore his U.S. citizenship
posthumously."
And they absolutely can. Legally, they have every power to do that. But on the House floor, one member of Congress from Virginia, a guy named Caldwell Butler, says, "Well, if Robert E. Lee is not fit for U.S. citizenship, then who is?" That was apparently a serious question that he was at. Well, everyone who's claim to fame isn't trying to destroy the United States in the most literal sense, right? Whose life accomplishments don't involve a war that leads to the death of 750,000 people. Right? And so Welcome the Wretched is I'm making the point that, look, if people go about their lives in very ordinary ways, unremarkable ways most of the time, and most of that, we stay out of trouble and we mind our own business and we try to go to work and live with our families to the best of our abilities. But inevitably, we all mess up. Inevitably, we all fail. And sometimes the folks who we hurt most poignantly are the folks who are closest to us, the people who we're most intimate with. And sometimes those failures actually rise to the level of being criminal activities. And yet the United States of America is a country that is nothing if not full of deviants and misfits from day one to the very to this very day. Right? And that's part of what enlivens our culture. Right? That's part of what makes our economy so robust, what makes our communities so vibrant, and part of the source of strength in our past, and I very much hope so into the future as well. And so we ought not to be pretending that to be a U.S. citizen means to be free from those imperfections, free from those flaws. When any one of us can look around, and we don't have to see who's on trial in New York, right, to know that there are U.S. citizens all over this country whose failures, may need to be remedied, but that doesn't mean that we have to cast them off as if our country is too frail to welcome folks whose imperfections stem from their very humanity rather than from whatever country it is that they were born in.
Right, and you use this phrase in your book, how I think it seemed a little tongue-in-cheek, right? That we turn to the cold neutrality of crime, basically to justify keeping certain people out of this country. Can you talk about how we should reimagine crime and denaturalize it a bit? Because these are a series of choices that we make as a government and as a society that don't come from God. We've made these decisions to structure our immigration policy in particular in this way. And when you trace it back, it really is just an extension of racist exclusionary politics from before. Just now people think that they have a legal justification for their preconceived notions.
Whether you have a faith tradition or not, whatever your faith tradition is, we can all agree that we did not find the United States Code, the federal penal code, or the state penal codes on a mountaintop someplace. We just created those, and we created those out of that messy cauldron of that is the political process. The war on drugs was very much spurred by the Reagan administration's desire to woo Southern white people into its fold, into the Republican Party's fold. And when we look at immigration specifically, the crimes that these days, year after year, constitute among the most heavily prosecuted crimes in the U.S. In the federal district court system nationwide are crimes called illegal entry and illegal re-entry. They're basically two crimes that target folks who come into the United States without the federal government's permission. They were prosecuted under Obama, under Trump, under Biden, and these crimes were born in the 1920s out of that really blatantly racist period in which members of Congress openly targeted first Southern and Eastern Europeans in 1921 and 1924, and then they turned their attention to targeting Mexicans. And the idea was that these weren't folks who were racially categorized as not white in that moment of time, and who were thought by leading members of Congress to be unfit for life in the United States. And these two crimes that were enacted in 1929, they're still on the books today, and they're not some afterthought criminal offense. They are being prosecuted every single day in federal courthouses around the United States, and as a result, people are being criminalized formally through the federal court system for coming into the United States without the federal government's permission. And after that happens, of course, there's the possibility of punishment and then deportation after that.
And the idea of crossing the border as a criminal act, can you tell us a little bit about the history of how that got criminalized, and maybe just to give us that context so we can reimagine it going forward?
In the 1920s, there was a strong anti-immigrant contingent within Congress that was successful in enacting quotas that really limited how many folks could come into the United States from anywhere outside of Northern and Western Europe. It really had already successfully cut off most migration from Asia, and then really targeted in the 20s folks from places like Italy and Eastern Europe.
And we should also say that the U.S. was turning boats away not too long after that,
right.
to Jews who were fleeing the Nazis. Keep going.
And that the legal power that the federal government used during the Nazi rise to power and during World War II to block Jewish refugees who got as close to Miami as being able to see the lights on the shore was the power that was granted to them by these quotas that were enacted in 1921 and 1924. But neither of those was able to target Mexicans, and they weren't able to target Mexicans not because members of Congress who were rabidly racist against Italians, for example, or against Jews, for example, liked Mexicans. It was simply because they didn't have the votes. They didn't have the votes because agricultural interests along the Southwest and the West were simply too strong to allow repeated attempts to target Mexicans to Mexican migration into law. But that changed in the late 1920s when a guy from South Carolina named Coleman Livingston Blease, who was a white supremacist. This was a politician who's made his name by celebrating lynching. When he was governor of South Carolina, he was so vocally supportive of lynching, that other governors from the South actually asked him to tone it down because he was giving them a bad name. And yet he used that open white supremacist ideology to eventually land in the U.S. Senate, and there he teams up with some of these folks who had already learned how to enact restrictive immigration legislation, and they're finally able to gather the votes necessary to 1929 enact a bill that introduces into law for the very first time, or creates in federal law for the very first time, the crimes of entering the United States without the federal government's permission, and that specifically is supposed to be targeting Mexicans, and Mexicans today, almost a century later, who are the principal targets of those laws, and then beyond that, some other folks from other parts of Latin America.
And then how did criminalization of cannabis, deemed the scarier and more Mexican-sounding marijuana at this time, play into this as well?
This was all part of this anti-Mexican hysteria. Right? The idea was that Mexicans were debased, culturally inferior, inherently, innately lazy, and very, very, very much tying them to the similar depictions of enslaved individuals just a generation or so before then. And so the decision to target cannabis, marijuana in particular, was very much tied up with this inferiority, this depiction of Mexicans as inferior, and as a result, should be punished through whatever means were available, whether that was the criminal legal system for that could tap their use of marijuana, or it was the federal criminal courts that could tap the fact that they had entered the United States without the government's permission. But of course, what we all know is that those powers were turned off and on based on commercial interests, based on business interests. So when growers wanted cheap labor to pick their crops, the Border Patrol simply turned the other way. Sometimes they actually participated in helping Mexicans get across the border and get directly to the places where their labor was needed. But once those laws were in effect, then whenever they wanted to turn them on and get rid of Mexicans, specifically in the early years of the Depression, they could do so. when the time we needed more labor when the World War II started. Of course, the U.S. turns to the Mexican government and says, hey, how about we partner? How about we team up and have some Mexicans come into the United States as temporary workers, because so many of our young people, our working age residents, are heading off to Europe and to Asia to go fight.
Well, really fascinating stuff. The book is called Welcome the Wretched, In Defense of the Criminal Alien, in quotes. César, thanks so much for coming on the show today. We'll put a link to your book wherever people are listening to or watching this and at majority.fm.
My pleasure.
All right, guys, quick break. And when we come back, we will be joined by Schuyler Mitchell. We are back, and we are joined now by Schuyler Mitchell, former editor at The Intercept, writer based in Brooklyn, whose piece in the Baffler is entitled Pinkwashing the Timeline. Schuyler, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to talking.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you wrote this piece, because this is a typical thing, an argument that you hear from supporters of Israel, that Israel's so LGBTQ friendly, and the savages on the other side, I mean, they're Muslim, so just think about it for a second. And you articulate how that kind of propaganda effort plays out. But let's just start with the term pinkwashing. What is it, and how do Zionists supporting Israel engage in it?
Yeah, so pinkwashing is the deliberate strategy of using a cloak of liberal values, LGBTQ tolerance, to shroud Israeli human rights abuses committed against Palestinians. So, in the wake of October 7th, what this has looked like, pinkwashing is not new, but it has been playing out on social media as, expressions like Queers for Palestine, or expressions of LGBTQ support for the Palestinian people have been derided as naive or contradictory, and it's essentially kind of throwing queer people under the bus in the name of propping up Israel as this bastion of tolerance in the Middle East, as if Israel's acceptance of LGBTQ people is somehow legitimizes its current military campaign.
Right, and it's been used even before this military campaign, as you say, to talk about how Israel is somehow this liberal bastion, when I would argue that there's human rights not being respected kind of undercuts maybe that claim. Now, you cite this sketch in your piece we're going to play a second of it so people get a sense. This is from November, even though it is about Columbia students. I guess this was before of course it was before the encampment, but I forget what action Columbia students took that prompted this. What What were they doing in November? I'm forgetting.
There were arrests in November. Columbia students, SGP and and JVP faced sanctions. There were all these protests. I mean, this has been going on for months now. So, and yeah, I wrote this.
They
piece
suspended SJP and Jewish Voice for Peace, I believe, or they were targeted, something to that effect. I guess the specifics aren't that important. But this Israeli TV channel, which is, I guess, their kind of SNL equivalent, and Brett Gelman participated in this as well, but not in this sketch. Did this I guess satirical sketch about college students in this country, and a lot of what you're describing is on display here. We're gonna play it in just a second.
Hi everyone, we are live on YouTube with Columbia Anti-Semitic News, where everyone is welcome. LGBTQH Hamas.
Yeah, I totally sim Hamas.
Yeah.
It's so trending right now.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Do you know why it's true? Because it rhymes. Just look at all this toxic Zionist propaganda. Kidnapped in Gaza. Does this look like Gaza to you?
Yeah.
All right, I think we got the gist. I think we got the gist. They do at one point talk. It's horrible. They do at one point talk about queer people, I guess. But that's just kind of a good example of, I think, the their attempts to satirize or say that in some way kids standing up for Palestine are contradicting themselves in some way, but really it's just like an extension of their portrayal of themselves as victims all the time and staving off the savages on the other side of the wall. If you could just explain that a bit more.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I saw that video, which went viral back in November, one of the things, that stood out to me was, so I think they said in that clip, we support LGBTQH with the H
Hamas.
being for Hamas. And then, one of the students later on says, I majored in queer post-colonial astrology, and they wave a rainbow pride flag that has the Palestinian flag in its center, sort of a composite flag. And then they, do a video call with a member of Hamas, and they're like, "We love you so much." And the Hamas militant is like, "If you come to Gaza, I'll throw you from the roof." Right. So it's very emblematic of the prevailing rhetoric, particularly, in the past few months. And what was interesting to me was that it used, like you said, Eretz Nehederet is considered like a liberal program in Israel. They critique Netanyahu's administration in their Hebrew language sketches, but in their English language sketches, which it's worth noting, they're doing them in English to reach a Western audience, and they're posting on YouTube. And it's very, it's a concerted effort to reach the West because, they've said, the writers of the show have said that this is an existential battle for the soul of the nation, and that they just need to do their part. And so it's interesting that what doing that part looks like is focusing on American college students, and then also kind of invoking these tropes that you usually see on like Fox News or right-wing programs, which is, the expression like, of course you have blue hair and pronouns. This idea that, they literally have blue hair in this sketch. The idea that leftists like look funny and are obsessed with pronouns and are obsessed with queer theory. These are tropes we see all the time. And to see that then used and conflated with loving Hamas was also really interesting, and something that I touch on in the piece of, this victimization, where not only are Israel supporters and Israel, being victimized by Hamas, but also, these queer students. And this isn't the only sketch. There's at least one other one that does a similar thing. So that was something I was just really interested in and wrote about in the piece.
Well, it's amazing to see that the program considers itself, I guess, liberal, right? Because we've spoken about this inherent contradiction of you can't be liberal in a settler colonial society, and but its attempts to appeal to the West kind of hinge on these themes of liberal democracy, and again, it can't be a democracy when you rule over millions of people and don't give them a voice. But like that is the portrayal of Israel that they want the West to absorb, and it's just fascinating because like these liberal college students, they're also a part of the West. Like there are Democrats that you're supposedly trying to appeal to with this Hasbara, but it's not. It's working. It's getting diminishing returns. It's just that this was, even before October 7th, something that was at the forefront of how Israel tried to portray itself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's interesting is there's also this contradiction where there's a lot of contempt for these queer students,
Right.
you know, and other posts on social media, you know, making fun of expressions like Queers for Palestine by saying it's, you know, it's like saying we're chickens and we love KFC, or there's just a lot of hatred, I think, that's being misdirected at, you know, queer people or, you know, Queers for Palestine. And that is itself, yeah, the contradiction, right? If you're saying that we're liberal and we're tolerant, but then, you know, why this focus on, you know, people thousands of miles away that, you know, are not actually, I mean, there was actually a tweet that I saw in the last 24 hours that was like, it's funny how, you know, the blue-haired social justice lawyer has gone from being a Fox News trope to being literally Hamas. Like, and we've seen that rhetoric crop up again in the latest, you know, police raids on college campuses. Like this idea that these students are not just speaking out in support of, you know, oppressed people, but that they're literally agents of
terrorists.
Hamas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you also see this is parallel propaganda, the pinkwashing, to when women like myself, or maybe you, I don't want to speak for you, Schuyler, but when people say like, well, you just go to Gaza and you'll get raped there. You would get raped there. And it's just like, oh, would I really? Because in the end, it just is like all of the oldest racist tropes in the book about how people of this skin color are going to go after your women. They don't respect your femininity, that they don't respect queer and gay people there. When you actually talk to Palestinians, it's societies have their own contradictions and bigotries, right? But there's nothing inherently anti-women or anti-LGBTQ in Gaza. It's just really a part of a carefully constructed project against, honestly, Muslims, propaganda project.
And I think, you know, the point that something I write in my piece is that there's no freedom for the dead. So, you know, if you support women's rights, if you support LGBTQ rights, you're not bringing liberation to people by killing them. That's just like a very basic, you know, material contradiction. And, you know, there was this real emblem of that in a social media post by an Israeli soldier where he's standing in the rubble of a Gaza city holding a pride flag, and the pride flag says, in the name of love. And it's like, you know, you can't liberate people these people are being bombed, they're being killed, there's a genocide happening. So yeah, so even, you know, whatever truths, you know, exist about, you know, homophobia or misogyny, like bombing them isn't going to change that either. So
right.
on a whole other level, in addition to it being an Islamophobic, you know, trope. So.
And I mean, this is also a part of, I think you'll see this consistently, and it's a good alarm bell if you're hearing a right-wing argument where it's a portrayal of victimhood that is completely disconnected from material realities. I mean, there's no reality in which Israel is the victim here, or is the David and the Goliath story. They are the top recipient of military aid from the most powerful country in the world. They have a nuke. They have the most advanced technology available. But that is something that you will often hear from right-wingers trying to justify atrocities, is that they're the ones who are actually victimized.
Right, yeah. And, you know, my piece, it talks about, I cite this journal article by this political scientist named Heike Schoten, who wrote a piece that was published in 2022 in Transgender Studies Quarterly that talks about extinction phobia. So this idea that this is a hallmark of ethno-nationalist regimes where the minority population is being cast as the real threat, that the minority population has the power to oppress, the people that are actually in power, and that they also have this eliminationist intent. Like, not only do you cast your political opponent as savage or threatening and evil, but also that they are literally trying to erase you, because that is something, once you create that construction, that like solidifies the national identity
and justifies
in
anything.
opposition to that.
And justifies anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so in the United States, like with white nationalism, we've also seen that, with far right people talking about, the migrants coming over the border, that they're threatening the American way of life. And that also working in tandem with this, the wave of transphobia, this fear mongering about trans people are literally trying to sterilize our children and like wipe out, a portion of the population. All these things are very insidious.
Well, the piece is called Pinkwashing the Timeline. Schuyler Mitchell, we will put a link to it in the description wherever people are listening to or watching this. It's on the Baffler. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. All right, guys. With that, we're going to wrap up the free portion of this program and head into the fun half where we will take your calls, read your IMs. Binder will be with us. I know he's got some thoughts on particularly the NYPD response to Columbia and the other colleges, city colleges too. So we'll be talking to him about that. On ESPN, we spoke about the playoffs as they and talked about every single series in the NBA and NHL playoffs. And we also gave our thoughts on the NFL draft, particularly the Michael Penix and Drake May picks. So youtube.com/ESPN show. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Oh, yeah, Left Reckoning. We had Hollywood Danny Bessner on to talk about his piece in Harper's Magazine about Hollywood. And Brandon, can you hear us? I just want to make sure you're...
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No, that was just his blank stare is just his normal resting face.
I just didn't want to... Like, if he was like surfing the internet, not knowing he was being broadcast.
Yes.
Oh, no, I don't mind at all.
We talked about that. We talked about Joe Rogan, who thinks it's over for us when we can get AI sex robots, and what is, I think, as R.M. Brown called, a self-report. Vivek Ramaswamy talking about how in the afterlife we are going to have to answer to people like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, and what are we going to say about what we did to stop wokeness or whatever. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We had a fun post-game show.
Awesome.
All I can say is I hope they don't start rapping. Like, after seeing Hamilton, I'm just expecting every founding father to rap in heaven when I meet them. So I'm just, as long as they don't start like giving me some hot bars, like an epic rap battle of history, it'll be fine.
God.
Yeah, that's what they've been doing is just going to Hamilton shows as ghosts because they love it so much.
Right. Well, it's an inaccurate and flattering portrayal, so that would flatter their sensibilities, I'd imagine. Go on, Brandon.
Well, I'm just saying, I just imagine you have a lot of free time in heaven. So you just like, spend your time engaging in hobbies. And like, once, they get a whiff of Hamilton, you got like Thomas Jefferson and like Benjamin Franklin just like practicing their bars up there with Biggie and Tupac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's forget like any sort of sense of like heaven or hell and just like the afterlife. Like whoever lets you in, presumably it's like a God figure or whatever, lets you in. And so you're good there, but then you have a secondary stage where the founding fathers of America come and chastise you. Isn't the God being like, hey, no, I let them in, they're cool.
Right.
But anyway.
And then I'd have a systemic critique of heaven to say, hey, did we vote democratically on these guys being able to have a microphone and perform?
I'm just happy to be there.
Yeah. You're a passenger.
I would be like, hey,
it was touch and go.
I want to talk to like maybe loved ones that I lost in like Earth before I talk to Thomas Jefferson about
Did I make a wrong turn and is this actually hell?
I mean, who's recognized at Monticello?
You don't even get in unless you got a 16 bars to spit at John
Press
Adams.
God. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we fleshed out that scenario. Are you going to be talking about epic rap battles of history on the discourse, Brandon?
I probably will.
Okay.
They're having like I don't want to promote other YouTube channels, and I don't listen to Epic Rap Battles of History anymore. But I did see that they're on tour, so.
Oh my God! No, those things always never sat right with me. I don't like people
It's
dressing
the worst
up.
of the world. The chap rap. Did you ever see that where it's guys acting
No.
like they're from Edwardian England doing rap? Chap.
I'm not so down on it. I don't want to be like.
But your cringe
like,
tolerance is like
Brandon's headphones pull out.
Herculean proportions.
Brandon's headphones pull out and like chap rap is playing.
Oh, God.
Really loudly over the speaker.
24/7, like 2011 Boston like white rap circle, like Sammy Adams is on the playlist.
Oh gosh.
some acapella rap covers from some
Pentatonics.
On
exactly.
cue. Oh gosh, I have a deep bench of memory for that. Anyway, what's happening though on the discourse actually?
Well, we will be talking about obviously these incredibly disgusting anti-campus protest waves of violence being committed by the NYPD. We'll be talking about the upcoming election. So stay tuned. It's going to be pretty exciting.
All right. Well, we'll have Binder soon, I believe. The number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break. That's fucking nonsense.
See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck 'em.
Things I do for the bigger game plan.
By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. We are back, and look at that. It's Matt Binder. Hello, Matt.
Hello. I didn't even realize I was late because we've been starting the second half, the fun half, so late lately.
You're right. I was actually on time today.
Yeah, so I was just like getting used to the new time, and then all of a sudden you guys surprised me with the boom, it's 1 o'clock, time to do the show. I was like, what?
Well, what is going on with your shows, Matt Binder? Plug away.
Sure. So last night, I think it was a very good show over at youtube.com/MattBinder. I had a number of clips, and I ran through the whole timeline and debunking of the NYPD and New York City Mayor Eric Adams and their amazing narrative, or maybe I should use their line that they said in a recent post on Twitter, where they said they're going to now use their social media accounts more fluently to dictate the narrative. That's a quote right there, dictate the narrative. So I went through their dictation of the narrative, and it was a full-on debunking of everything they were saying. We got some new data out today about their claims, and I'm tearing that to shreds too online. But the show is still great. youtube.com/MattBinder. Cast.com shortly.
You cut out slightly, Binder. You may want to just
give us the URL again.
Yeah, give us the
URL. youtube.com/MattBinder and doomedcast.com/MattBinder. No, wait, doomedcast.com for the podcast version of the show. I got confused there.
All right, you might want to fix your mic just because it's doing that stupid crackling thing again.
Oh, okay. Give me a second. I'll be right back.
Yeah, but you got that out. I'll take this time to read some IMs and turn off the voicemail. The number is 646-257-3920. Mike from Texas. I'm sorry, Emma. Did I hear it right? Did you say during your second interview that there's nothing inherently anti-woman or anti-LGBTQ about Gaza? What? You can protest Israel's genocide without making these uninformed statements. Yes, there are a few dozen Christians in Gaza, but Gazan society is a derivative of Islamic culture, which definitely is inherently anti-woman and anti-LGBTQ, as are other ancient religions. That's not to say every Gazan wants to enslave women and kill gays, but the fact that those attitudes are inherent in there and other Islamic societies or societies run by Islamic law is just an irrefutable fact. Anyways, love you all. Left is best. Mike, appreciate the sentiment. I would never say that because a country, because Hamas is an Islamic or right wing as opposed to a secular organization, that makes Gaza inherently anti-woman or LGBTQ. I take the lead from LGBTQ rights groups from within Palestinian society, whether that be Queers for Palestine, that's more internationalist, but like literally when people talk about their experiences, and I don't think that's the cue that I take from that. I do not think that it's uninformed at all, to be honest.
For Israel and Apartheid South Africa, a collection of essays by Ilan Pappy. I recommend that. It goes into lots of the pressures that Gazan women are. I think the rape thing is a hysterical Zionist smear thing, but it's true that things aren't great for a woman. Standard woman in Gaza, the mean average, and that's not because of Islam. It's because of the occupation that they are under.
Also,
there's a number of non-Islamic majority countries that are well known for having problems with how women are treated. India, for example. What does Islam have to do with that?
Exactly. And I also will say that you quoted me correctly. Nothing inherently anti-woman or LGBTQ about Gaza. Yeah, that's 100% accurate. Inherently. That's what I said. Look up the word.
Also, the United States of America cracking down on women's choice. We're not an Islamic nation. I mean, we're talking now about the possibility of an incoming administration monitoring women's pregnancies to make sure they don't get abortions. I mean, what are we talking about here? Is this religious? I mean, it is to some extent in terms of Christianity. I don't know what Islam has to do with America's infatuation with subjugating women to this sort of thing.
But people who are sort of victims of a long genocide process, which is what Palestinians are, preceding October 7th, there are pressures on women for fertility that aren't very nice to think about, and the blame for that lies on not their fucking religion, but the colonial context that they are being oppressed under. And again, this sort of dodge to ID. This is why I hate. And I was the new atheist. I had a Richard Dawkins Out Atheist T-shirt. That whole shift to this idealistic religious thing is I'm sorry, it's a dodge for the actual structural issues that are setting the terms in that region.
I mean, if you want to have a broader discussion about religion causing problems, I think that's fair. But I think the idea that any religion is sort of unique in its own sense in terms of the harm it puts out for the world, for the societies that it encapsulates, I think that doesn't do any real good, because I don't think it's any different in that sense.
If you start there for Gazans, I'm sorry, you're a bigot. It's stupid. It's completely secondary and trivial compared to the actual brutal context that they're under.
Also, in terms of like what Gazans are subjugated to, they're like, in terms of like how people can dress there and things, they're in no way as strict as other countries in the region. Like, if you were to visit, for example, Saudi Arabia, you would probably need to dress very differently. If you were to go to Gaza, well, prior to everything that's been happening since Israel destroyed it, but if you go to Gaza prior to the past 8 months, you wouldn't have to be like head to toe, head covering visiting. The dress code, there's a number of things that are quite different that people, and you see this a lot with people who want to smear Palestinians, just like equating them to like other countries where like it's all racist, obviously, and Islamophobic, but they wrongly try to claim that, like, you know, if we could see, if a woman goes there and we could see more than your eyes, then you're in trouble. You know, no, that's not the case there. It never has been.
Right. Also, I mean, I know everyone wants to jump in here, but just to share my thoughts quickly, it's just part of a shifting colonial trope. Like the barbarism, the sense that brown people are barbaric is the same. Just people have shifted for explaining why. And before, it's because they weren't Christian or because they weren't religious, they were polytheistic. And now it's because they are too religious. You see this in Africa, you see this in parts of the Middle East as well. And it's the same narrative you heard going into Kuwait. Like, we have to save brown women and brown LGBTQ people from like devious brown men who are seeking only to oppress them. When uplifting the Gazan people or across the board is going to be the easiest way to ensure like women's liberation over there. As we've seen, like the rising tide of, economic and socioeconomic conditions in countries tends to correlate with women's liberation and at least the expanded roles for women. In Gaza has to exist, like Matt was saying, there's only so many roles for women because they're under a brutal religious oppression, not by specifically Muslims, but by Israel, being supported by a theoretically secular country, the United States of America, that has its own barbaric practices that are implemented piecemeal around this country by religious fundamentalists. Right. But, people like Richard Dawkins, people like Sam Harris don't like to consider the American barbarism that we inflict on American citizens, not just citizens abroad, as being part of the same kind of inherently barbaric trait, because it doesn't always gesture to religion.
Right, exactly. Sam
Cedar, by the way.
Writes, what'd you say?
You might need to actually rejoin Binder, because it's not very often, but every once in a while you get a little bit of.
All right, let me jump out. I'll be back in a minute.
I'll keep reading IMs until you can come back.
Actually, I just want to pile on to this topic because I have an infinite amount of time for it. I'm going to say like a 6.5-minute diss track about it. CBS News, February 19th, 2020. How Jewish American pedophiles hide from justice in Israel. Interesting story there. That is, again, CBS News. It's not some far left outfit. It's probably an outlet that's accused protesters of being anti-Semitic. But Jewish Community Watch, an American organization that tracks accused pedophiles, has been trying for years to find Caro and help bring him justice. This is one of the pedophiles. Since the organization started tracking accused pedophiles in 2014, it says more than 60 have fled from the U.S. to Israel. Given its limited resources to identify these individuals, JCW says the actual number is much likely larger. Now, this is not the thing that I think is the most important to emphasize about the state of Israel, but if we're going to start slinging mud about people being rapists, we're going to bring in all this stuff.
Well, I mean, it's in part because they will take anybody to increase the demographic majority of Israel, right? So they have much, like, for example, the provinces within Israel don't recognize same-sex marriage, but if you are a gay person, you can immigrate and then have your marriage recognized when you go to Israel. And that's another major myth about that we just actually talked about with our second guest, the pinkwashing that Israel engages in.
But what, people, defenders of Israel will say, and they think this is exculpatory, is that that's because Israel as a state does not perform marriages themselves, because as a religious ethno-state, they leave it up to the rabbinate. Mm-hmm. And so, like, it's a way for them to kind of have their cake and eat it too. Like, well, yeah, like our religion won't allow us to marry you if you're same sex. And the state doesn't perform religion because it's a religious state. But if you happen to get a marriage somewhere else, then you can come here and we will, tolerate that marriage.
Totally.
But just to Matt's point, it's not just sex offenders. It's just criminals of all type that will seek shelter in Israel because of this non-extradition treaty. There's like a famous crypto scammer who is, I think, associated with the Netanyahu family, who is hiding in Israel at this exact moment. It's just the type of safe haven that they provide. And it doesn't really necessarily matter if you are trying to seek recompense for it. They will protect them. That was even part of the the Tinder swindler documentary, where he happened to be in Israel. So there wasn't something these women can really do. And then he was brought up on separate charges of scams that he was committing in Israel.
Well, how about the fact that Israel is one of the top diamond exporters in the world, even though diamonds are not produced in Israel? It's in part because they launder their illegal mining of diamonds through Israel. And I mean, the more you learn about Israel, the more insane it becomes. But yeah, I know that's a bit of a tangent.
That's what happens when you have carte blanche as an American vassal state.
Totally.
You get to do because that's really what allows for this. It's not any sort of specific favor towards any religion that America necessarily has besides Christianity. It's that Israel is a military industrial complex outpost in the Middle East, and that means that for certain ththings they get carte blanche.
Glad to see you back, Binder. We'll read a few more items.
How's it sound? Better?
So Absoluteless says, me and you, Binder, are dying on the hill of doubting victims were raped. What I have, again, an infinite amount of time for is to say that rape is being used as a propaganda object for an ethnic cleansing. Are you there, Binder? You with us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't hear what you said, though.
But so we got somebody in the comments, which I want to address. Absoluteless said, we are dying on the hill of not believing rape victims. And what they said is we deny that the victims of October 7th got raped. What I deny about October 7th was what the Sheryl Sandberg sort of idea that this was a systemic rape campaign. I've never doubted that incidents of rape and also incidents of civilian killing that we can condemn happened on October 7th. I've never doubted that at all, but I will say, and I will continue to say, as the most important thing to emphasize about sexual violence on October 7th, that it is being used as a propaganda object to do an ethnic cleansing right now, and it is being lied about and exaggerated to a point where it is a policy by Hamas, and not just maybe what happens when you have an extremely undisciplined, oppressed people that actually aren't even allowed to have a military try to do resistance. Yeah, when you know what, that's what happens. It's going to get ugly. This is the reality, and this is not just Israel. This is every colonial context where a colony is fallen. So
and they're always portrayed as rapists, the colonized.
There's not been a single instance of a Israeli October 7th rape victim coming out and saying they were raped that I denied, because there hasn't been a single person who's come out and said that.
Yeah.
There's a single, and even in the face of that, I don't deny the possibility that it happened.
Exactly.
On top of that, though, there is a single person who has come out, and it's horrible that this happened to her, but there is a single person who's come out with a firsthand account that she was assaulted in the home of an individual she was forced to stay with in Gaza. In her retelling, he had to hide this activity, which doesn't make it seem like it's systemic, that he had to hide it.
Seems to indicate the opposite.
You're right, because it wouldn't be approved. again, even then, who knows? So I'm not denying, but I'm going based on facts. Secondly, the secondhand accounts we have are from people who've lied, people who have said things that were later refuted by people who actually were at these kibbutzes that were attacked, saying this did not happen. This individual, an individual matching this description, does not even live here. Is not here at all. Individuals who've already lied about 40 babies being beheaded, confirmed lie. Individuals lying about a baby being burned alive in an oven, confirmed lie. So yes, we do refute known disinformation when the facts become available to us. And even in light of all that, we don't discount the fact that because of how things are in acts of terror and in war, the possibility that rape was used as a horrible weapon could have been. Yep. We are saying that there is no proof that this was systemic and used as a Hamas campaign.
Yes. And by the way,
like
50 journalism professors agree. They just wrote a letter to the New York Times to reevaluate their reporting on this. We could go on and on.
I just want to plug. I did an interview with Heidi Matthews and Tanya Cerisier. Bombing Gaza isn't about sexual violence. We posted that 13 days ago. I would just recommend that. And I appreciate people calling us out on that, because there's no light without heat, but this is something that needs actually clearly an extended amount of elaboration. I appreciate Binder going through it like that, because this is a despicable use of sexual violence for mileage in an ethnic cleansing.
Yep.
And that's the most important thing that needs to be said about it right now.
Chardonnay Socialist, I was tear gassed and hit with rubber bullets while covering during the WTO protests in Seattle, and confirmed that both hurt like hell. Yeah, I've been tear gassed before, but not hit with a rubber bullet. It's extreme. It's difficult. I didn't get the worst of it, but you feel it in your eyes and the pain in there for hours. Deaths pulled from the future. Did you guys see the moment where an assistant dean tried to talk to UCLA students? They asked him to stay, but he obviously refused, and the whole crowd chants shame at him. Was a great moment. No, I didn't see it. Violet says, hi, MR crew. I'm at the courthouse for the arraignments of Columbia and CUNY students today. If you're interested in what's going on here, I'm happy to answer questions. Currently, there are Zionist photojournalists trying to photograph people exiting arraignment. Things are tense, not the least because Trump is also appearing in court today. I emailed y'all. We'll check that out. NJ Mailman, hey, Emma, what's your drug of choice to watch the Knicks tonight? No, I'm going to watch Sober. That loss at the Garden, I can't even talk about it. Shook, poor Mitchell Robinson. What was he doing? Shook me positive vibes to all Knicks fans. I think we can get it done. I'm not THC as well. NJ Mailman. Violet says, hi, oh wait, I already read that. Hopeful one, why is Anna going after you? And Sam, she's implying you don't do research. I know I come here a lot and mention them, but I can't believe I have no idea what she said, but I know I do my research and it's okay. Like, I think I'm not sad about anybody criticizing me. That's
no
fair.
light without heat.
I know that I do my research, and I know that our coverage on whatever.
But we haven't seen it, so give us details, because
what's the topic that we don't do our research on?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure, but
the reference?
I feel pretty confident.
I imagine it's about cops.
I feel pretty confident in my ability to research and our show and the way that we cover things accurately.
Yeah. So let's get it.
I don't really.
Maybe it was about crime.
Maybe it was about crime in New York City, something that myself and Emma and Matt Leck probably know nothing about.
Yeah, no.
Certainly not as much as someone doing the research over in California.
With
I'm going to say I will admit anti-cop bias when they come on the news and say that they looked at some fentanyl and then their face started melting like in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I just assume that they're not telling the truth, but that's just me. So
Oh, I felt reinvigorated yesterday when I saw the cops lying in a way that really excited me. Like it was exciting to see them do this.
Before we get to the thing,
I don't know what it's about, so I don't want to get into it.
I know, but I just want to say it must be really frustrating for an issue like Gaza to get in the way of wanting to rehabilitate cops.
That's true. That's true. So let's, speaking of this cop propaganda, Bender, you posted this. This is 5. The NYPD released a hype video about their raid on Columbia University's campus on Monday night. And
Because they care so much about workers.
Yeah, right. We said this before, but the image of that basically vehicle and the cops breaking into the Columbia building via kind of a crane is going to be used in history books for centuries to come. That will be one of the iconic images of this fascist crackdown on anti-genocide protests.
It'll be on Columbia's website in terms of, hey, new students, come to Columbia. We have a rich history of activism.
And we responded poorly in 1968. Oh, wait, actually also in 2024, but we've learned from it this time.
Right. Until the next encampment sets up.
Yeah. So here we go. The NYPD wants you to know they're on the case. My God.
Whatever
the budget these pigs get.
Whatever you think you're gonna get here, though, you will never guess what happens around the 50-second mark.
There's no, and that's a sidewalk, right? Which sidewalk would that be?
Eating well.
That's the Amsterdam Avenue. So we got.
They're in the situation
pounds
room.
are on that too.
This is the Osama bin Laden raid room, by the way, being used for the Columbia protest.
Exactly.
I mean, it had been used for like cracking heads and homeless people.
like a meteor is going to hit Earth, and they need to like navigate, an expedition to land on it.
Right. Oh, but it gets real. You're never gonna guess the change in tone here.
You got some planned process up there. Yeah, we want to start getting the morals.
A24.
This is so fucking.
Here we go. Here we go.
Bass drops.
We got a big fucking truck.
Oh my God.
Let's break into the second floor to save this property.
Yes, all that property damage that those kids are doing. Oh, wait, damn. Are they messing with the door?
Right now, we're inside of the Hamilton building in the Columbia University. We're in the third floor of the
terrorism on board.
We're going through the building, looking for the
kill list.
Student protesters that took over this building. As you can see, the emergency services behind us, conducting operations. We're checking each floor. We're checking each door.
So brave.
If we come over here, you can see that they have set up sort of an encampment inside of the classroom. There's
sort of an encampment.
Guys all over the place. And when we actually came in here, they actually had
heroes.
Desk.
Is that a left-handed
up to the
desk?
window so that they could have a little bit of come in and get them.
Terrorists.
You can tell how not dangerous these students are by the willingness of the police to do something.
I can't hear you, Brandon.
I was going to say you can tell how not dangerous the protesters are.
Yeah, pause it.
What'd you say?
Yeah, I was going to say you can tell how not dangerous the protesters are by like the police willing to go in. Like I think that's like the real litmus test. If the police are willing to actually go in the building, then you know that there is no danger for them.
I mean, shout out to the Texas protesters who threw Uvalde in these pigs' face at every opportunity, because that is the real contrast that needs to be drawn here.
Right. Also, you could see very clearly in some of those images. They don't show any images, by the way, of them arresting the individuals in the Hamilton Hall. I'm going to assume if that was a very to serve and to protect manner, they would have been very proud to show how flawless that was achieved. But I'm going to assume, based on the fact that they didn't show it, that they weren't so nice to those protesters just sitting there in the room. But anyway, they used the stack of like wooden chairs and like desk pushed against the door as proof that outside paid professionals had to be involved, because how would students know to barricade themselves in a building like this? How would they know how to do that? I mean, beyond the fact that this is like the most obvious thing in the world, you don't need to be taught to put something in front of doors so that no one, like my 8-year-old and 4-year-old barricade themselves in their bedroom when they don't want it, when they don't want to be bothered or whatever. Besides that, though, it wouldn't shock me actually that Gen Z, who's grown up to basically know that they need to do school shooting drills and do these sort of things to prepare for those. Wouldn't shock me that they are quite professional at barricading themselves in their classroom.
Yeah, right, exactly. Is there more to that, Binder, or is that basically
it's just the same thing? There is, I don't know if it's worthy playing the rest of it to get to this point, but one of the moments with this dramatic music behind it is one of the head cops standing in the middle of the encampment where the tents, and he was going, just look at how filthy this is. It stinks. It reeks. It's like, what are you? Is this an official police matter? Do you
and
guys?
Also, it could be stinking. It's also could be stinking because we saw Zionist counter-protesters spraying things in UCLA, and we know that they have previously used stink bombs against New York City college kids, or at least, I'm sorry, New York City protesters, because that's like a tactic that pro-Israel people use.
I actually thought you were going to say it could stink because pigs are on the campus now.
Oh, well,
That's all these damn pigs.
They're just there for that sweet overtime.
Yeah, I know, right? It's just incredible.
Especially because all these guys would just love to be protecting retail workers and landlords instead.
Yeah, protect and serve, I guess. All right, let's take
it really, like, I know people have come to expect like police departments to act this way, but I think like just the way this video was formulated, it was really beyond what I could even imagine. Like, they feel this way, they act this way that when they're in the field, but to document themselves in this way for themselves and put it out there, I was like, wow,
it's Israel vibes.
Crazy.
This is Israeli propaganda vibes.
Well, let's also say that the NYPD has connections with training with the IDF, so that's part of this like synchronicity between fascism abroad and fascism here.
I think this is just what, like Matt was saying, this is what happens when you like watch propaganda that's meant to target a community that you just are totally immune to. Like, that's what the Israeli propaganda feels that way. That's why cop propaganda always feels that way, because it's just when you're just totally immune to whatever that group's propaganda is, you're like, wow, I can't believe anyone believes this. But I'm sure to like the right kind of voter, that was very scary. Look how many cops had to show up. Like, just the presence of cops makes some people feel like there must be trouble. Like, it's a very escalating thing. And so, look how many had to climb up that truck ladder.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Like that Transformers.
Let's do this JD Vance thing really quick. So JD Vance is openly auditioning to be Trump's VP. Kristi Noem threw a bit of a wrench in the situation when she admitted to killing a puppy and bragging about it. I don't know how that's going to win over suburban women that Trump desperately needs. They love dogs more than they love most people. But putting that aside for a second, this is Vance going on CNN, and Caitlin Collins here asks her if he, as he's condemning basically the students who are protesting against genocide, if he universally condemns any demonstrators that engage in property damage. And she really corners him here.
But you can't police people for being anti-Israel or pro-Israel. You can police people for violating the law. And we have seen some of that with some of these protests.
Okay, so you agree that people who break in and vandalize a building should be prosecuted?
Exactly.
Okay, I'm just checking because you did help raise money for people who did so on January 6th, which was, impeding an official proceeding, breaking into a building that they weren't allowed to be in, and vandalizing the Capitol.
Well, Caitlin, I know that this is the obsession of the national media to talk about what happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago on January the 6th.
It's not an obsession. I'm just seeing if it's a double standard.
Let me answer the question, Caitlin. I mean, look, here's been my basic argument about January the 6th. If you beat up a cop, of course, you deserve to go to prison. If you violated the law, you should suffer the consequences. But there are people who protested on January the 6th who have had the complete weight of the Justice Department thrown at them when at worst they're accused of misdemeanors. Now, again, there are people who are accused of worse offenses, and that's a problem. But you can't have Black Lives Matter protesters.
Wait, well, I mean, what is he talking about? So he says at worst they're being accused of misdemeanors, and then he goes on to say that some of them have more serious charges. Can we go back actually just 5 seconds? I want to hear that again.
the 6th, who have had the complete weight of the Justice Department thrown at them, when at worst they're accused of misdemeanors. Now, again, there are people who are accused of worse offenses.
Yes.
And that's a problem. But you can't have Black Lives Matter protesters who rioted and vandalized goes free when you have people who were actually peacefully protesting on January the 6th who have the book thrown at them. That's the double standard that I'm most worried about.
Yeah, I don't think there's an
Sorry,
obsession.
like this is the standard is it righteous or not? Because the fact of the matter about January 6th, if that election was stolen, yeah, I don't care about any of that damage. I don't care about none of it. But the truth is that Ashley Babbitt got killed because of a lie that the political team that this guy works for told because of an election. But like the truth is, like if I don't care about any sort of property damage for. Like, I don't care about, it's lunchtime. People want to occupy this counter. I don't care about none of that stuff.
Well, it's about the nature of the protest, right? Which I think people are desperate not to talk about.
Exactly.
Collins does a good job there with J.D. Vance and calling out his hypocrisy. But really, the standard should be what Matt is saying, is that that was a mob of people who were conspiracy theorists and who had bought into a lie that the election was stolen. And then the Black Lives Matter protests and property damage from that, or any property damage from these pro-Palestine encampments, which, by the way, we've seen cops do more damage to the property at, say, Columbia University than any of the demonstrators did. But like the difference there is because that is in service of something righteous, to stop a genocide, to stop police brutality, versus to try to overturn the democratic results of an election.
Yeah, I mean, we should do this Sagar one too, because this also gets into the violence, and then that point is like is very important, because the thing that they're saying about vandalism getting into the hall is entirely that's not actually that. Again, they're just looking for a license to crack skulls, because before that their license was they're doing anti-Semitism, they're doing anti-Semitic chants, and then you see how the cops enter that place. It's not really concerned about the property. But yeah, this is Sagar and Crystal, and Crystal absolutely corners Sagar into the the word nihilism gets thrown around. This is a clear demonstration about either nihilism or crypto-fascism, in my opinion, the way Sagar tries to discourage these students. Let's take this.
If you have a medium infraction, it should be met with a medium-sized, reasonable response. So the reasonable response at that time would have been to do what they did in the interim, which is meet with them and be like, okay, guys, like, what's going on here? Hey, we have commencement in 2 weeks. You're all going home. If you don't clear out, you're going to get suspended. It's going to be a problem, and you don't want that. You've paid all this money. We have all this going on, and I think, we're talking about lowering tension. But they threw the cops in.
Why?
Was a huge mistake.
Go ahead.
That said, now, though, by boxing people into a corner and also kind of both throwing the cops and then backing down, they've set very unclear expectations. And now we have property damage and a wholesale, occupation of the hall. And unfortunately, I do think it's going to end in some tear gas or something. There's no other, what other options do they have? There's no other way to clear people out. You're going to barricade yourself inside of the hall. Like, what are you going to do? And especially if they start vandalizing, which they already did, to get in there.
Well, you could just, do what students want you to do, which is to divest.
No,
I mean,
that's a great point. We'll take that. But again, if they got in there perfectly safely and didn't harm a single little sliver of wood in that hall, Sagar would still be calling for them to tear gas them. What are you going to do? They're occupying the hall. What can you do? He does not actually give a fuck about the property damage. That is insincere talking point by a fascist.
It is, and it's also just shocking because when you're talking about how they pay all this money to go to the university, that's a part of why the students are so outraged. It's because their tuition dollars are going to furthering an ethnic cleansing and the genocide, and so their claims are extremely clear. They want the university, and by the way, credit to Brown for responding fairly immediately and being one of the first major universities to just basically say, we're going to take a vote on divestment right now. That was an alternative option, and then you wouldn't have to have any of the property damage that, Sagar is so concerned about.
Yep.
You could have just listened to the kids.
What you do at this point, Sagar and Jetty, is you give in to populism.
Mhm.
The students already voted. Almost 2/3 want this. Okay, and then the trustees. Is it trusteeism or is it populism? The trustees said, no, we can't do that. Actually, you can't do Jewish Voices for Peace or Students for Justice for Palestine. And this is where the populist ends up. So let's see, Crystal.
Free speech, folks.
Crystal box him a little bit more.
Well, you could just, do what students want you to do, which is to divest.
No,
I mean, that's the other thing is that I know,
but that's not going to happen.
But
And the
why
students
not?
need to understand that
But
too.
why not? Because there was a vote at Columbia Barnard, and it was overwhelming in favor of divestment.
Yeah, but the students don't control the endowment.
Yeah, but like if you
Why
have
not?
faculty and students are overwhelmingly like, just do this thing, then why not just do that thing? And then you won't have your hall occupied and you won't have to send in the cops, et cetera. But, I think bottom line is, like I said, these students have already been kicked out of school and arrested.
She saved him by not making him respond to that point, but go back a little bit, Bradley.
He looks nervous even trying to make this point.
Thing, then why not just do that thing? And then you won't have your hall occupied and you won't have to send in the cops, et cetera. But, I think bottom line is, like I said, these students have already been kicked out of school and arrested. So they're not
some
afraid.
of them have. We don't really know.
But
I also would say this: don't throw your future away for this. I know some of these protesters. Please don't do this. Your parents spent a lot of money on.
I disagree with that.
You want to get your ass expelled for like this? What are you going to do 20 years from now?
These are people who have agency and who feel like they're standing against a genocide, and I'm proud of them. I think it's incredible to watch.
20 years from now, you'll be a footnote to history. You're going to be in some idiot on YouTube.
You know who will be a footnote in history? Will be someone like Sagar,
Yep.
who's not
Giving him
who-
too much credit. Too much credit.
I
What-
mean, he
not
won't even
a
be
footnote.
mentioned. And that's because his whole thing, his whole shtick that Matt alluded to earlier about populism and even about these conservative claims about free speech crumble when that free speech actually threatens power. And Zionism is deeply intertwined with like systems of white supremacy and power and capitalism and the way that we've conducted our foreign policy in the Middle East. And so now that is threatened, that's when right-wingers who talk about free speech and populism crumble, because they're not really interested in the will of the people. They're mostly interested in kind of making these aesthetic arguments and aligning themselves with a power structure and even regressing as well.
Now he goes into PBD mode. Think about your future and the deals you won't be able to make. It's pathetic.
Well, they've thought about that. They're putting their careers on the line in part because they think this is so important.
But it's also a completely wrong-headed, like old school way of thinking that's no longer relevant. Like, first of all, this one's been trotted out. Like, your parents are paying for your tuition. Where do you think, like, the vast majority of these kids get this sort of distinction of right versus wrong and morality from? Like, I would wager to guess the vast majority of these students that are protesting because of what's been instilled in them from their parents. I would wager to guess that their parents are very proud of their kids for making a stand here. Not all, obviously, but a good amount, I'm sure. Second of all, like the idea that you're throwing away your future forever. Listen, I graduated from college, Jesus, almost 20 years ago now, something like that. No one asks where I went to school. No one gives a shit. No one fucking cares. Like, unless you're going into a very specific profession where you need to get like a license to do what you do, like a doctor or a lawyer, no one fucking cares where you went to school in the real world. It's just the truth. The truth.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more of this too.
Well,
if you want to go, Brandon first.
go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think, Crystal hit the nail on the head towards the end there, at least like tangentially. So I guess didn't hit the nail on the head really, but this is about teaching kids, I think a lot of much is to do with like, protecting Israel, protecting the state of Israel and the endowment itself in that kind of relationship. But this is also about actually hammering the point that this kind of populism doesn't work to the youth, because we don't want in institutions of power, which Columbia is, and it's not a woke one, it's just a normal neoliberal institution of power, do not want to sort of teach the lesson that protest, that direct action, that mass populism is actually a way to change things. And so a lot of this is about disabusing the youth of the knowledge that they are capable of changing things in a way that is outside of like the proper channels, whatever those happen to be, which usually just allow for whoever is in charge of those proper channels to ignore your voice. And so a lot of these crackdowns by police, we saw it during the BLM, they're about just preventing this notion that mass action works, even though history has proven otherwise. And that's why they're constantly having to revise history of civil rights movement to pretend like it went down a different way, because they don't want you to learn the lesson that, like, well, no, sometimes voting doesn't work. You have to take to the streets. You have to, disrupt things in order to get your way. And it doesn't require a mass of people over 51% of the country voting for it. It just requires a dedicated minority of people who have had enough. And, we're just getting to that point in American history, or I guess American as a national project, where more and more people are going to be taking to the streets, and stamping that out and preventing it from actually having a meaningful, or at least appearing to have a meaningful impact on the way our governance work, is a primary goal in tamping out all of these protests.
Brandon, that's such a good point, because I do think that there is an existential threat to a lot of people in power right now, where the fact that these young students basically are not just voting Democrat and thinking that their political education ends and begins on what they do at the ballot box in November, where there's an understanding that this is a continuous process of fighting against these kinds of powers, and that sometimes you have to take things with force via activism and via these kinds of actions. That is a threat. That is a real threat to the natural order of things. And so the fact that that's spreading like wildfire like this, I think genuinely is just as much of a terrifying prospect as is our kind of hopeful dismantling of the Israeli settler colonial project.
Absolutely, because it doesn't take as many people to disrupt society as it does to change things at the ballot box. And that's what they're concerned with, the youth finding out, that the Martin Luther King Jr. didn't exist in a vacuum of civil rights where no violence ever happened and no force was ever used and no one was ever inconvenienced. He existed in an entire ecosystem where the potentiality for violence was omnipresent, especially racialized violence, not just towards Black people, but the idea that it might, be a huge conflagration in America. And that was enough to get change made. And so what they're trying to get people to not realize is that you don't have to wait till November to vote, vote out Orange Cheeto Man. You can take to the streets and you can stop traffic and you can prevent things from moving forward. And then you can demand that in order for things to move forward, that they change things. I mean, the Republican Party does it in Congress all the time. They hold up the debt ceiling every year now, now. And we don't send the police in to make them do their jobs.
And it's important just to note that there's implied critique that this stuff doesn't work. This has a tried and true history.
Oh, yeah.
Sagar Enjeti is a 32-year-old from a neoconservative think tank. He is a fraud on these matters. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Listen to this guy who in 1960 took a stand against apartheid for Liverpool University and then got recognized for it.
These are black and white pictures from March 1970 of Liverpool University's anti-apartheid student protests.
The main incident was an occupation of the Senate House, and the reason for that was the presence of Lord Salisbury as the Chancellor of the University, extreme right-winger, and he devoted his political career to the prevention of...
Oh, pause it real quick. Look at that. Some vandalism, guys.
I'm really concerned.
Somebody put paint that says "Keep Salisbury Out" on. Well, send in the fucking cops, right, Sagar?
First, he had investments in South Africa and refused to disclose the full details of those. So because of that, we made our protest.
So you staged a sit-in and it lasted for quite a while.
2 weeks. It lasted for 2 weeks, yeah. If I'm honest, I suppose we had the time of our lives, really, but not particularly comfortable. But there was a great camaraderie amongst the people there, about 300 of us, sleeping on floors and so on. But it was fantastic spirit there because we believed in what we were fighting for.
Pete is now being recognised as having been on the right side of history, with Liverpool University awarding him an honorary degree.
As compensation, I guess, for the degree which I didn't get. My final expulsion was just a few weeks before my final exams, so I would have got a degree of some sort. So 46 years later, I got an honorary degree, and I guess we finally made peace with the university.
Do you regret getting expelled?
I'm asked that question often. The only way I can answer is to say that if I were to be in some sort of groundhog scenario and live through those events 1,000 times over as a 22-year-old student in 1970, I'd always do exactly the same thing again. And I still believe in the things that we're fighting for.
Natalie Powell.
Awesome.
So who are you going to believe?
Yeah. Well, you know, if it took him 46 years to get his degree, man, and we all know he couldn't do anything for 46 years. He just wallowed away.
He paid the price. He paid the exact price that Sagar's warning these kids against, and he's saying, you know what? I would do it again. And that is righteous. And anybody suggesting any kind of other method is actually stripping people's lives of meaning. We wonder why people don't understand, like, oh, I'm lonely, I'm alienated from society, life doesn't have purpose. Because this is the purpose. These are the purposes. And when you have people saying, actually shut up and take a check, they're robbing you of life.
Well, yeah, and they hate people like this. They hate people who stand up in the moment and say things like this, because it makes it harder, and when they're revising history, to pretend like they were doing this exact same thing. You know, like the more people who are out there in the streets protesting, the more people who are speaking up, the harder it is, like, once this dies down, hopefully as soon as possible, for, you know, the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, for the Richie Torreses of the world to be like, well, I was always against it, and, you know, like, I was doing the brave thing of working behind the scenes to change things, or like I put my name on a list somewhere. Like, it's, you know, it's embarrassing.
Joe Biden's done that, claiming he was on the ground at protests when there's no proof whatsoever.
Of course.
He's ever.
Yeah,
it's just, you know, it's this imagined history that every liberal thinks that they are entitled to by voting blue every year. That you're entitled to claim the Civil Rights Act. You're entitled to claim, like, the Civil Rights Movement and the second wave and first wave feminism. You're entitled to those things as part of your political legacy, even when all of these people would have been against it. Because, you know, like, many of the political parties were, I mean, many of the politicians, regardless of party back then, were against it. There were a few who stood up, but, you know, in hindsight, everyone gets to be for it as part of their just, like, legacy.
Well, to feel good about themselves, essentially, right? Like, it's basically a bedtime story. But I also just want to point out that what Sagar said about how it's not going to work is literally contradicted by past history that he was fighting for as well, this activist from Liverpool. What's his name, by the way?
Oh, that's a good question.
We should probably give it, just because what a king. But yeah, I mean, like, the universities did begin to divest, and that was a big part of why apartheid fell. Because these students, and it wasn't back then, it took years later, but Pete Cresswell, that's his name.
Yep, he's a socialist. I think he's actually on Twitter.
All right, guys, with that, let's take a few calls, perhaps. Calling from a 956 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 956.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Well, who's this? Where are you calling from?
It's America from Mexico.
Oh, America from Mexico. What's on your mind? Americo.
Well, last time I called, I mentioned how I was really frustrated with liberal transphobes, and I actually didn't want to talk about this again. I want to talk about the Elon Musk gigafactory that's coming to my city, but I'll just wait until that gets built to call back.
Sure.
I actually wanted to mention some Marxists who are dipping their toes into transphobia, specifically the dorks at Sublation, like Ashley Frowley, who's been tweeting how Graham Linehan was right. For those of you who don't know, Graham Linehan was a former TV writer and obsessive transphobe who spends his time on Twitter posting pictures of teenage trans kids post-surgery shirtless, who's been condemned by the Holocaust Memorial in the UK for comparing Nazi experiments to trans healthcare, who calls people he doesn't like groomers, like actor David Tennant. And I just would love to know which of these things Ashley Frowley thinks Graham Linehan was right about. And just to highlight how brain damaged she's become, she tweeted a video of the police attacking the university students and said, "I am not sure even this level of repression would have been decried if it was against truckers or TERFs." So I just want to point out how insane it is to look at police attacking students protesting genocide and sit there and think, how am I going to use this to defend TERFs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they suck. I mean, that's the simple put. I think people that, I don't really know Ashley Frey that much. I did watch one of their things about Slavoj Žižek where they beat around the bush for like an entire fucking time. I mean, I think it's embarrassment and a bunch of incompetence. And I think probably more people in this sort of vague miasma, like if they want to engage with those people, but I think they're lunatics detached from reality.
I mean, TERFs,
succinct view.
Sorry, Matt. But TERFs, they center their own kind of anxieties in everything, basically. I mean, it's just like this obsession with preserving femininity as like this special status that cannot be infringed upon, or in some way it's a zero-sum game to welcome trans women into the like umbrella of femininity. They are constantly thinking about like themselves and grafting it onto like other dynamics in society. So
beneath attention, I think
they're-
is what I would like to say. Like people shouldn't be following those morons.
Yeah, I think they're trying to branch out into the like a right-wing audience, and I suspected as much when she started having those friendly chats with James Lindsay.
Yeah, they're silly.
But
bottom feeders.
Yeah, I'll hang up now and left is best, and just so I can tee off. I have a question for the guys because I think this might just be for them. Do you guys ever play the Legacy of Kain games? And if you did, opinion, left is best.
all right, we'll
later.
let them respond to you off air or after we hang up. So, but you were right. I have no idea what you're talking about.
No,
so
nor do I.
I'll let them take over. All right, thanks so much, America.
I have not played Legacy of Kain, but I am familiar with the games, Soul Reaver, and all of the.
All right. Well,
I've not.
Okay, well, I
calling
win.
from a 336 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
This is you.
Hi, this is Josh from Norfolk, Virginia.
Josh from
I just
Virginia. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Hi. You know, in light of all of the student protests that's occurred, I kind of wanted to highlight what's been going on at my alma mater, UNC Chapel Hill.
Okay.
So, you know, one of the two biggest things that have kind of happened with this is when UNC attempted to break down the encampment and brought in cops from all kinds of other colleges across North Carolina. Sorry, I had a cough there. The students in response marched over to the flagpole in front of the administration building and took down the American flag and replaced it with the Palestinian flag. Really cool imagery.
Nice.
And of course, during the crackdown on it, cops came through, sweat, were very brutal. And the interim chancellor, Lee Roberts, came out in a massive PR stunt and was escorted by cops, and then took down the Palestinian flag and hung the American flag, like, you know, to look like, oh, look at me, hell yeah, I'm a macho man, yeah.
Right.
Like one of those types. And, you know, at that point, you know, I think it was 36 students detained, 6 arrested, you know, just a brutal crackdown in the encampment. But the second thing that happened is last night, the UNC Campus Y, which is like a hub for all the social justice organizations. They have a mutual aid pantry, a coffee shop that employs students, just all kinds of, you know, great programs go through there. They announced that they have shut it down indefinitely. And it's from the administration, no explanation whatsoever, just, yeah, we're shutting down the Campus Y now.
Right. I mean, it's just amazing. And then I love like the pearl clutching I'm seeing from people like, oh, they're really gonna like deprive people like the way that USC canceled their commencement. And it's like, yeah. And if I were a student at this time, if I were, you know, I would hope I was involved in the encampment, but if I wasn't, I would welcome that.
The people depriving it are the Zionist administration.
Exactly.
That's the one who canceled it. They should let that student speak and hold the graduation and let the students continue to protest.
Appreciate the call, Josh.
Exactly. Thank you. Left best.
Yeah, left is best. Go
They
ahead.
did the flag thing. They did the flag thing at City College too.
Oh, really? I didn't even see. It's
Yeah,
so hard
you
to
didn't
keep
see
track.
that?
Yeah.
The
Bill
NYPD
Ackman-
posted. The NYPD posted a video of it. They were really proud of it.
Yeah.
They had the City College police force, the school's police, ripped down the flag, and there's an incredible video of him tearing it off the flagpole, putting it into a ball and throwing it on the floor. This is a flag of, you want to take it down, that's one thing, but to just treat it that way is another thing. And then they put a video of the NYPD swapping places with them and putting the American flag up as if it was like, the 9/11 firefighters putting up the flag after some big, event. Like this. They really, they always talk. These same type of people always talk about like professional victims. Like these guys want to be heroes so bad. They want to be heroes so bad, and when they are presented a situation to do so, they can't handle it and they don't deliver. And then when there's not a position to be a hero, when they just need to be normal, they have to escalate things so they can be, get their, hero rocks off.
Yeah, right. Well, their version of heroism is usually centered around like a savior complex that's very heteronormative and white and masculine, and like about these kind of threats as human beings as opposed to standing up for what's right as a broader society. It's cowboy mentality versus what actual heroism looks like in society right now, which is what those kids are doing. Zero Summer, I really don't understand why Crystal still works with Sagar. Once again, there's no difference between, quote, right-wing populism and fascism.
I appreciate Crystal doing it. I've come down hard on Crystal for that exact reason, not for her work, but because she brings him to the party. But I will say her work since then has been really good in sort of drawing this out of him. And showing that, like, I think she wins that matchup. But I do agree that I don't welcome him anywhere outside of that context.
Yeah,
I think you should definitely do if you are up for it and can handle it, you should definitely do shows with people who you can who you disagree with, so you can do things like what she did in that clip. But yeah, if you're gonna like associate with them afterwards too, like.
I think she's
you could turn down sushi with the boys. You could turn down sushi with the boys.
Well, I think that there's a good, right. But I think, it's there in many ways, we had an IMer say that I guess TYT was critical of me and Sam recently, and that's fine. That's their right. And we've had criticisms of stuff that they've done. So I don't know the specifics of it, but they've been covering Gaza well from what I've seen. I mean, Crystal's been phenomenal. And I think like there is some clarity too, where you see someone who just doesn't cover it at all, basically like David Pakman, where people
cover it to concern troll the people standing up to the ethnic cleanse and that he's silent on.
Right. It's
I
just
don't know the nitty gritty on this, but I'm gonna chime in anyway. I couldn't believe that post.
Yeah,
I haven't gotten into the nitty gritty of this.
But I personally just to button up my point really quickly is just like that. I think if these are your politics and you're moved by what's happening in Gaza, it's a clarifying moment about, even if we have disagreements with other shows.
Oh yeah, Ben Glebe should be fired though too.
I don't know what his status is.
I mean, I would get Zionists out of the paint. I mean, Brianna Wu, like, do you have a relationship with her at TYT? Like, she's a lunatic supporting a genocide and smearing everybody against it that your network is supposed to stand for. Like, I don't think this stuff can be tolerated. I think we need to actually have this out. There's no light without heat. Let's turn the heat up.
Fair enough.
I was going to say, I think it's punching down to have your co-host be like a right-wing libertarian or like right populist, because all of those points, especially if you're actually willing to push them on it, it's just like, all those points just literally evaporate under
it's like you're the Harlem Globetrotters, right? Basically.
Yeah. But people still seeing the game, so you got to be like, I don't know, is it worth putting this person on just to watch me beat them up in public? And then that's is that there's value in that? I don't know. There's entertainment value in that, certainly, but I think at the end of the day, you're still giving jobs to people who, whose politics are not particularly very good. So it's a mixed bag.
I mean, personally, I think she handles it really well.
I don't think it's brave. I'm gonna say.
No, I think she handles it really well, because if I was in her position, it would be so easy to host a show with a libertarian and win every time, because I would just finagle the production, work with the producers to make sure that every show, it's like, what's this? How did this happen? Another segment on the age of consent laws? Oh my God, here we go again though. Oh, don't know how you're gonna come out looking in this one. Just do it every day. Just do it every day.
Dan from SoCal says, I'm so proud of these I'm so proud of these kids. They really seem to have learned from the Occupy movement, where we were a loose collection of ideologies centered around the critique of economics. These kids are on message and understand messaging. They have discipline, and most importantly, they are centered on the humanity of others, which is more emotional and powerful to center around. These images will be a blight on Biden's legacy for all time. Yep,
well, here's the thing, though, and that's a great point. But here's the thing, an additional point I want to make there, and it proves just who these people are, that they're students at the school. The reason they're able to do that is because they have those existing relationships with people, because those are their classmates. They know each other. There's a sense of care for each other that, you can have all the solidarity in the world, but you're just going to care about someone more if you have a pre-existing relationship with them. It's just how human nature is.
Right. Ramona Frankenstein says, you guys have talked about how all the people arrested at the raid at Columbia have been students. I believe this, but is there a source I can point to as proof of this? I'd like to have this as my arsenal when someone tries to suggest the protesters are outside agitators. You can go to our first segment where Eric Adams basically sputters, and Binder tweeted this out when asked about the specifics about who these outside agitators are. Basically, just
they released a list. I mean,
They have new stats. Yeah, they have new stats, and they're now claiming the headlines all say roughly half of the 282 total people arrested at Columbia and the City College were not affiliated with the schools, NYPD says. And I read over this, and it's very clear that they used this time to finagle the stats and report it in a way that fits their narrative. City College was never brought up in any of this because City College is a public university. Until I believe the day before the crackdown, there's an open campus. It was an open campus. You could come and go as you please. No need to have any affiliation with the school. There was never any question that that public school was different than Columbia, because Columbia had completely locked down their campus. It's a private institution. And so they had claimed that Columbia students were not the majority of the protesters. It was specific to Columbia. And they had also claimed that specifically the people in Hamilton Hall, the ones who went inside the school, were not students, that they were professional agitators. This data that they've since released conflates both the Columbia and City College data. When you break it down, you find out that 80 people who were arrested at Columbia did have an affiliation with the school. Only 32 did not. But you can even break it down further. What does an affiliation with the school mean? Is that just current students? Are we talking about faculty as well? Are we talking about alumni as well? We're talking about we could talk about a number of different people who have a right to be at the school or could have been there at the school. We also don't know community members. We don't know who was arrested inside Hamilton Hall. That was their specific claim. Hamilton Hall was infiltrated by outside professional agitators.
Right.
They didn't break that down. On top of all this, in that total 282, they're counting street arrests. I know this because a lot of people were arrested on the street. That was the final tally of the total people who were arrested on that day. They said close to 300 people were arrested on that day. It was roughly 282 people. Now they're coming out and saying 282 people were arrested at Columbia and City College. They are counting street arrests. There are names that have been called out by the New York Post, which obviously they're trying to ruin these people's lives, but is actually helpful to me because it confirms this. They confirm that in this list of people they have, I guess, one of the 282, they go after the specific guy, is a doctor in Harlem, a 42-year-old doctor or something. And I forgot what outlet, some outlet, I think maybe it was Politico or someone, found the doctor and interviewed him. He said he's a local doctor. He had solidarity with the students, heard there was going to be a crackdown. He went down to City College, not even Columbia, City College, and was drumming on the streets in support of them when the NYPD came and started pushing the crowd in the street and grabbed them and took them in. He says he was on the street when he was arrested. So they're counting street arrests. So we don't know how many people were arrested actually on the campuses. We don't know how that actually breaks down between Columbia and City College when we just talk about on the campus. And we don't know how many people were in Hamilton Hall. And we don't know what the definition of affiliation is.
And more importantly, it was never substantiated to begin with. It was just a smear.
Yeah.
And in terms of names, and in terms of names they keep throwing out, The mayor himself keeps throwing out two specific names as professional agitators.
Yeah, Binder, we
Both of
covered
them-
this a little bit in the first. I don't want to go over it again.
Oh, got
'cause
it. All right, sorry, I missed the beginning.
No, it's okay. We started the show with it. Yeah. So, but yes, one of them is just like a mom that visited her kids the week prior, right? So
yeah.
Yeah,
and another one is a 60-something-year-old longtime activist who was simply invited by the students a few days ago. She wasn't even there the day of the crackdown. She was invited by the students for one specific day to do a sit-in class on their activism. That was it, because she's a longtime activist. That's a normal thing that happens at protests,
right?
And on college campuses as well.
And this is also, I mean, just the outside agitator trope is just like part of has a long genealogy of trying to imply that any organic protest movement that occurs or any organic organizing that occurs either across class lines or within an oppressed subgroup in the United States is actually not being motivated by widespread discontent or widespread mass distribution of maldistribution of resources, but instead is being like organized by some sort of shadowy outside, usually un-American figure. You see this like in posters that the Ku Klux Klan used to say about like Black people are being organized by communists. More recently, it's been part of a larger anti-Semitic trope about like Jewish people like organizing Blacks in America or like immigrants in America to upset democracy or like to destroy the Western civilization. And now the more modern incarnation is that the BLM protests and these student protests are just being, outside from where? Where would they be coming from? Like, how can
Ted Cruz can answer that question? I didn't honestly anticipate going to this clip here, Brandon, but it fits very neatly into what you're saying. How can we make the protests that are happening organically on college campuses about some outside funder that is contributing to it? And can we do anti-Semitism as we accuse others of being anti-Semitic? I give you Ted Cruz, who's more interested these days in podcasting than he is in actually being a senator.
Senator, there is money that we now know that is behind a lot of these protests. There is a lot of similarities. The tents match at many of these college campuses, which is hysterical. The chants
and it
match.
shows they're not even hiding it.
Yeah, they're not.
I mean, this is organized. This is deliberate, and there's real money behind it. And if you look at it, in many instances, so copycat tents have been seen at Harvard, at Yale, at Berkeley, at Ohio State, at Emory, and they're organized by branches of the Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, funded by George Soros. Now, how much does that mean? Well, at 3 colleges, the protesters are being encouraged by paid radicals, and we now actually can follow the money. We have some specificity.
Just pause. We don't have to cut. Bill Ackman, a billionaire, and Jerry Seinfeld's wife, is it? Bankrolling these as very rich people, just to say to the extent it's artificial, it's on the Zionist side.
Right.
Radicals, and we now actually can follow the money. We have some specificity. Those paid radicals are called, quote, fellows of a Soros-funded group called the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, USCPR. Now, USCPR pays up to $7,800 for its community-based fellows and between $2,880 and $3,660 for its campus-based fellows. Wow. In return for spending 8 hours a week.
Can we just pause
organizing campaigns led by Palestinian organizations.
I want to make sure people understand this is not a little bit of money. This is big money. 8 hours a week, not 40 hours in the week. When you can make $3,660 for spending 8 hours a week, that's one day of work.
And by the way, $7,800, that's $8,000 for 8 hours a week.
Yeah.
That's $1,000 an hour.
That's like bribery to students almost. That's big money.
Can you pause
that's
it?
Real money.
So there's zero evidence that this money is going into the pockets of students. He's also seemingly conflating that large expenditure as salary per student for their pro-Palestine activism. I'm not entirely clear, but because it's made up. It's funny that Ted Cruz is concerned about funding and where it's coming from right now, because a complaint was just filed against him with the FEC about his alleging that Cruz may have improperly directed radio distribution and marketing firm iHeartMedia to send over $630,000 to the Truth and Courage PAC, a group dedicated to Cruz's re-election effort. So he might know a little bit about improper funding sources going to places where it shouldn't go. And like, as always with conservatives, this is projection. But I was surprised to see that it wasn't just Ted Cruz saying this. It's the Speaker of the House who went on News Nation and is saying this stuff. Bradley, if we have this clip. There's this is, I guess, the new Republican line that Soros is behind this.
America gives Israel $3 billion a fucking year, and it comes back to us with just lies and propaganda. And the idea that like a foundation money going to Students Just for Palestine is anything to do with the protest against genocide we're seeing is just a smear.
It's a smear. And also funny that they're doing, like, the anti-Semitic thing is that George Soros is the great replacement guy.
It's not ironic. Zionism depends on anti-Semitism existing.
That's true.
Herzl was an anti-Semite himself. He thought Dreyfus was guilty. That's why they would, in part of why the Jews needed a homeland. Like, and if there isn't a apocalyptic threat of anti-Semitism, then actually nobody thinks that Israel needs to exist. And so it depends on anti-Semitism.
Brandon, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's so, like you were saying, funny and so stark how, especially on the right wing side, they're just so used to using anti-Semitic tropes that even when they defend Israel, they just can't help but use not just anti-Semitic tropes, but to gesture to specific Jewish people who are like embodying these tropes. Like, not at least, but when liberals invoke these kinds of tropes, it's usually because they don't realize that they're doing it. When they talk about outside agitators or stuff like that, they don't realize the sort of deep history there of like disrupting civil rights by implying like that. But he just says George Soros. Like, oh, it's George Soros. It's just George Soros.
Well, I mean, that's in part because many of the Christian Zionists that support Israel are massive anti-Semites. They want Jews to return to the homeland so they can die in the apocalypse so Jesus can come back. And some they'll save if they accept Christ as their savior. How benevolent.
Well, only some. There's a fixed number of seats if you believe the Bible, which I do not. But did you see the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing that she tweeted out? That was very funny. Where so you saw it, Matt. So she's not going to sign the
International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance bullshit.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the anti-Semitism bill, but I realized that sounded kind of silly. But she's not going to sign it because some of the anti-Semitism that she practices in, like, right-wing evangelical communities, would be inadvertently captured under that bill.
That's so amazing. And Mike Johnson, speaking of the Christian Zionists, he is one of the biggest ones in Congress. He's also repeating this trope here on I guess News Nation.
Speaker, thanks for being with us here on the Hill.
Happy to be with you.
Appreciate the time. So you say that you could go after the funding sources of these universities if they don't essentially get their act together quickly. So let's tick through some of the things that Congress could do. Maybe tax the endowments, pull federal funding for grants, maybe go after student loans. What is realistically right now on the table for Congress as you see it?
Well, we have deputized our committees of jurisdiction. There's a number of committees that touch on some element of this. It's not just the House Education and Workforce Committee, but it's also Judiciary, it's Ways and Means, it's the Energy and Commerce Committee, it's Science, Space, and Technology. Some of the committees have jurisdiction over the grants that are given to these universities. They collect billions of dollars. There's a lot of federal funding that makes its way into these institutions, and if they cannot respect the most basic constitutional rights, the civil rights of their students, and protect them, their safety, then they don't deserve to be funded by the taxpayer.
What about the endowments?
Well, these
are tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about whether they should be taxed. They also get very generous tax benefits as they're operated as nonprofits. All that is on the table. There'll be a lot of discussion, investigation. We have to do what we must to stamp this out. This anti-Semitism movement is dangerous. This is not constitutionally protected free speech. I was a constitutional law attorney. I ironically used to litigate campus free speech cases. Okay, this is far over the line. This is inciting violence. They are physically threatening fellow students, closing campuses down, occupying buildings, destroying property. These are common criminals, and they need to be treated as such.
The White House has condemned this. We have heard from the press secretary, we have heard from statements from the White House, but we haven't heard from President Biden himself since April 22nd in basically a 10-second or so moment on camera. Why do you think the president has been close to silence on this issue, at least in front, as it relates to getting in front of the camera, making a statement, and just sort of laying out where he stands?
The silence is deafening.
All right,
The president needs to speak.
To the Soros part really quick. That's towards the end. Sorry about that.
I will just say, I think it's also striking how little Americans understand about, organizing, about protests, about like movements and activism, that the idea that you might have the same tent is some sort of like gotcha, when I'm sure like they just passed around, like whoever's organizing just passed around like a pamphlet or like a list of like, hey, here's the cheapest tent at Dick's Sporting Good. Just go grab it. It costs like $15 because
maybe
they're
buying
students.
them in bulk.
Exactly.
They said
Yeah,
one person,
like,
maybe
it's-
everyone's not going individual to REI. Maybe they're saying, hey, go and pick up like 20 of them.
Right. All right. Here's the part that I was referencing. Sorry about that.
Hamas is a foreign terrorist organization. We saw the Intifada flag that was flown at that university building at Columbia University. Should the FBI step in and investigate here?
I think it's a dangerous situation. Hamas openly endorsed the protest at Columbia University. They literally did that an hour before we spoke there last Wednesday. We had a press event, and I met with the president of the university, President Shafiq, in her own conference room, and I told her with four of my colleagues from the House, she needed to resign if she could not get control of this situation. What's happened at the campus, the escalation, the violence, the necessity of the NYPD coming in to break it all up, never had to happen. We need administrators to step up, university officials to step up and do their job. The most basic function that they have is the safety and security of their students.
Too far at this point for the FBI to look into this, or not necessarily?
No, I wouldn't say. I think the FBI needs to be all over this. I think they need to look at the root causes and find out if some of this was funded by, I don't know, George Soros or overseas entities. There's a sort of a common theme and a common strategy that seems to be pursued on many of these campuses. I noticed myself, and many of us did, while we were on site at Columbia University, the tents at their little encampment there, many of them matched. They were same color, make, and model. Did somebody purchase that and send it in? It looks pretty orchestrated to me.
You know why they'd rather talk about the tents is because when you actually say that anti-Jewish hate is happening, you can't substantiate that. I grant that is probably fairly troubling for a young person who was brought up in a Zionist household, who was propagandized to believe that any criticism of Israel is setting this table for the next Shoah, to be exposed to anti-Zionist protests. What we owe those students, ironically, given all this attack on DEI, or is a trigger warning that you are about to receive a certain type of education that might be difficult for you. And that's all. That's all that, and also, of course, everyone's safety, including the anti-Zionist protesters themselves, needs to be protected. But like, as far as anti-Israel chants being violence, that is a lie, setting a pretext for cops to go in and smash heads of protesters.
It's also, it's also setting the groundwork, not to disaggregate it from what's going on in Gaza, but to set the groundwork for future protests in the United States of America being tamped down for being like anti-American. Because, it's a hop, skip, and a jump from like, oh, well, anti-Israel protests are illegal and anti-Semitic. So what's going to be the excuse for like making anti-American protests illegal? I mean, they're already basically illegal in most states at this point. Well, I guess not most, but 2/3, let's say. Depending on like how your governor is. And so like it's hard to see people chant for this stuff, especially as reproductive rights are quote unquote on the ballot. And if the ballot doesn't get reproductive rights back in some of these places, what exactly is the next step that people are going to take? Ultimately taking to the streets. And if you imagine that these protesters are going to be treated different than the women marching for reproductive rights, I got bad news for you about how cops treat women.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Should we quickly do this Kristi Noem thing, or just do one? You want to just save it?
Okay, I guess Brandon and Bender might want to do
All right, yeah. Let's.
It really depends on what's in this. I don't want to see a snuff film.
Yeah.
This is an 8mm. I don't want to like a snuff film on like.
We
Thursday
don't
night.
have the footage of her massacring Cricket, okay? We don't have that footage quite yet. We just have her very graphic retelling of it and almost just like cold, dispassionate sociopath.
I'm telling you, if we had the footage for it, there'd be like a giant effigy of an owl in the background. This was a animal sacrifice to a god.
I mean, is she a
No,
witch? We don't know.
I think it's just like pure like sociopath. Even the way she describes like as like a gravel pit sounds like some Stephen King like bullshit. Like she just went down to the gravel pit and like choked a puppy to death with her bare hands, and then like had this blank 1,000-yard stare eyes.
Oh, you mean this kind of stare? You mean this kind of stare? As she looked into the eyes of Cricket as the final specks of life left his body, that's the kind of look that she gave him?
Mom's gonna be home late. She's at the gravel pit again.
Oh damn, he's still kicking. Gotta head back to the truck and get some more shells.
I mean, we'll look at that splatter on her over there at the gravel pit.
You can just tell that like when she felt the life leaving the body of the animal, she inhaled deeply as though she was like taking in its soul, like fucking Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat. Just like
Or like Voldemort, not to be a millennial referencing Harry Potter, but with that's how he got to split his soul up or whatever stupid thing she decided on later in the books. Horcruxes, yeah. I'm pretending I didn't know that off the top of my head. Anyway, here is the puppy killer herself, Kristi Noem, defending the killing of Cricket.
In your words, why it came to that decision. I mean, unfortunately, dogs that are violent sometimes have to be put down. But I guess people, because you shot the dog, is there a difference in the way you put a dog down? I'm not really sure, but I don't think people understood it. I want to give you a chance to explain.
Jesus.
Well, Sean, you know how the fake news works. They leave out some or most of the facts of a story. They put the worst spin on it.
Can you pause it? Okay.
that was a long pause.
This is from an excerpt from your book, Kristi.
Right.
The fake news thing doesn't work when they are your own words that you wrote down.
When it's a direct quote from your book.
Thought about it, sent to your editor, it got sent back to you, you then published it, and this is an excerpt that is being reported on from your book. She thought this made her look tough, and she miscalculated.
I mean, honestly, like right-wing Jay Leno could barely get the question out before he was just like, I just want to understand. So like sometimes when animals are violent, you have to put them down. So he just like trails off and she's just.
He's like, yeah.
That wasn't the case this time.
I thought you froze for a second. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Brandon.
And they're both thinking like, aren't we supposed to be like trying to compete in the suburbs?
Right, I know, that's what I'm saying. It's just incredible because
where dog killing is extremely popular.
Yes,
yeah, especially in North Dakota.
Suburban women love to see dogs die. That's what I
white
hear.
suburban women definitely don't care more about their lives of their dogs than literal human beings.
Oh yes, oh my gosh. Put an average child in Gaza. If Gaza was filled with puppies right now, you know that those women in Columbus would be saying, send in the National Guard.
The ICJ would have Netanyahu in handcuffs if Gaza was filled with puppies.
It's the only way they can feel. It's like Taylor Swift songs and like and torturing animals.
All right, go back a second.
Well, Sean, you know how the fake news works. They leave out some or most of the facts of a story. They put the worst spin on it. And that's what's happened in this case. I hope people really do buy this book and they find out the truth of this story, because the truth of the story is that this was a working dog. And it was not a puppy. It was a dog that was extremely dangerous. It had come to us from a family who had found her way too aggressive. We were her second chance, and she the day she was put down was a day that she massacred livestock that were part of our neighbors. She attacked me, and it was a hard decision. And the reason it's in the book is because this book is filled with
just say like if. Let's just grant this like killing, this sort of Israeli style killing spree on the farm by this dog. Why would that be a hard decision then?
Right, but she didn't even say it was a hard decision in the book. She was like, it was a job that needed to be done, and I knew another one would have to be done. Soon.
Yeah, and it was like,
Cricket is a terrorist.
Then another one will have to be done. I was like, whoa, what does that mean?
I know. She said when
another even worse job had to be done afterwards, which I think was the smelly goat killing.
Oh, right. But these things, as I said, they come in threes. So who's she going to kill next? Christie's on the loose here.
What didn't make it into the book? Is another question.
Right.
She's got a trail of blood behind her.
That was the justified killing.
And it was a hard decision. And the reason it's in the book is because this book is filled with tough, challenging decisions that I've had to make throughout my life.
I mean, that's just sad. I mean, like I'm from North
I would have
Dakota.
left that one out.
Yeah, I just think like you're trying to show your executive experience, and the example is you're killing goats and dogs. Like, stop embarrassing us, Christy.
She's doing a version of Joni Ernst, right? Joni Ernst with her
Like
castrating pigs, but people don't think about pigs in the way they think about dogs. This country loves its bacon.
Domesticated animals.
Yes.
Also,
Well,
I don't think people responded well to the Joni Ernst thing either.
What'd you say?
I don't think people responded well to the Joni Ernst thing either. Forever ago. They were like they didn't like stand up and applaud. They were just like, that's weird. I wish you kept that to yourself.
But what's amazing too is like Sam's theory is that this was to appeal to Trump because Trump infamously hates dogs. But it looks like she's having some issues in Trump land. This is Kimberly Guilfoyle, Don Jr.'s girlfriend. Quickly, her
promoting her book, her picture book entitled "The Princess and Her Pup."
I sometimes.
There you have it. Christy Noem didn't do the research. How are you going to talk about killing dogs while the president's
princess and her
daughter-in-law is
pup.
trying to sell her book about a dog?
This is just like 16 seconds, Brandon. Just 1 sec. Let's just play it really quick.
You know, I just can't imagine that because there's a forever home for all animals. I don't know what happened. Maybe somebody slipped that in and she didn't see it. I don't know, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So that's a tough one to take.
Yeah, I know. And I respect everything she's done for her state and the movement. And I just don't.
You know, I just can't.
That's the funniest split.
They're so disappointed.
It's a really weird backdrop. I sometimes catch the Kimberly Gargoyle show because like I'll be watching like Power Slap clips, which they only keep on Rumble, and then they'll just play that right after. And like I've never seen a newscaster like slur their words so much. I know like Glass Houses, but she always comes right. Don Jr. comes on like beaked out, and then she comes on like zanned out. It's like a really weird like they should do like a
yin and yang over there.
Like crystal / like cigar type show, but it's like uppers and downers they'll call it.
What do they?
Not breaking points, breaking down.
They should do a show together called Speedball.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is The Bender with Kimberly Guilfoyle and Don Jr.
All right, guys, no more time for calls, but that was very fun. I'm glad we did that. Gonna read some IMs to get out of here. Kristen O.M. Chomsky. Kristen, I don't know. Do you guys... Oh, Christine Noam Chomsky. There we go. Do you guys remember how Mike Huckabee's son killed a dog and Mitt Romney tried his best to kill his dog on the roof of his car? Anyway, solidarity forever with Comrade Cricket. Yeah,
I'm honestly pretty sure, like, Huckabee obviously, that hurt him, but he had no chance to begin with. But I honestly think the Romney dog thing was a major factor in him losing.
I'm sorry, but
really
that's
was
really messed. Like, that's terrifying to put the dog on the top of the car. That's really messed
Psycho.
up.
I mean, Huckabee leaned on it's been a while since the details for this, but Huckabee like leaned on people not to investigate his kid.
Yeah,
killing a dog at Boy Scouts.
Oh my God, I just was laughing because Cricket's ghost wrote in, "Avenge me, MR crew." We will.
Oh my God, that's the thing is, it also her line, like, she's obviously lying too, because if you read the whole thing, like, she wants us to do the context. The dog was apparently just a very happy-go-lucky dog who she took to a hunt, and he wouldn't go hunting with the other dogs. He would just go frolicking amongst the birds that were there. Like, he would just be like ruining their hunt, I guess.
Flushing instead of pointing, basically.
A massacre.
A frolicking dog does not sort of add up to this like vicious beast that's breaking chickens' necks and shit.
Right.
Like, I'm
But
sorry.
that was his
it's
last
just
mistake.
Right,
Trying to
not-
frolic out
yeah.
there.
But I mean, the suffice to say that conservatives would rather kill you than to nurture you or sort of train you in any kind of way. And the
Well-
second you step out of line, it's curtains because mom's got to get back to
and she
killing goats
says-
or something.
She says she hates the dog because she couldn't get it to hunt. Like the hate part comes after the frolicking bit. It's not like, oh, he murdered all these chickens and now I hate him. No, it was this dog was frolicking happily, having the greatest day of his life. I hate him. Then he killed a bunch of chickens because I let him out of my car and I had to shoot him in the head.
Yeah, I don't understand though. Okay, but like I get it. You know, if a worker can't work anymore, you put one behind his ears.
I mean, you
but,
kill
like,
the worker. We all understand this. Yes.
Yeah, like it's a little on the nose, but but I get it. Like she didn't even try to have a professional trainer. Like there's no such thing as a bad dog. They're only bad dog owners. Like you didn't have like a professional trainer try to train the dog.
Yes,
could it be
she has the
could it be a
money.
non-hunting dog? Don't you have like it's North Dakota? Don't you have like 18 acres of land behind your like modern farmhouse?
Well,
Can't
South
just, like,
Dakota,
run
it'd be
around
easy.
out there.
But like,
Oh, I'm sorry, South
some
Dakota,
dogs-
the bad one.
Some dogs just aren't cut out to do certain work. Like I hate to bring this up on a day where we saw how brutal they can be, but maybe this is a good example too to show how just much more brutal Christy Nomans. Even the police, when they train a police dog and it's clear that that dog's not cut out for that work, they don't take that dog to the back of the shed and put a bullet between its eyes or the back of the head. They rehome the dog. They decide this dog can't be a police dog. Let's find him a home.
Yeah, cops only shoot their dogs by accident when they're trying to shoot you.
right, yes.
And then they shut down the city for the funeral.
And two things about the
Or
dog
they're,
thing.
or they're very scared. They're very scared of the little dogs they have to shoot while opening your gate, usually. But the German Shepherds, they try to train to be police dogs. They're always fine with those guys.
So what we're trying to say is that Christy Nome should have become a cop.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
She has the disposition.
But the dog getting out of the truck is absolutely her fault. Like the reason those chickens are dead is because the dog got like if she does not have the dog secure in her vehicle, that is not on the dog. That is on her.
Yeah, it's a bad
like she is responsible because she's like everything about this is pointing to her being a very irresponsible and bad dog owner.
Yes.
And then killing her way out of it.
I get the dog thing connects to people more than the goat, but we really gotta stress here that the dog pissed her off. She killed the dog, and she decides, well,
I haven't had
while I'm
enough
at it,
yet.
I might as well take out the goat too. I mean, the
I'm on
goat
a
didn't do
roll.
anything.
I also want to point out, and I don't want to belabor this point, but when I was reading the passage, it felt like she had already decided to kill the dog before it killed the chickens, and like, you know, and only the chicken thing only made her do it like right there. Like she could, like she was going to kill the dog anyway, but then like the
Cricket
chicken
was on borrowed time. Yes, I think that's the inference.
so she was like, no, I got to do it right now because you know it just this is a dirty job, but someone's got to do it.
I'm the decider. I'm the decider.
Yeah.
Kowalski, I like when people bring up religious arguments because I can respond with one of my favorite Bible verses is 2 Samuel 6:14. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, clad in linen ephod, a priest's upper garment. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and the sound of the trumpet. You know how cool it would be to see the head of state dressed in the drippiest outfit you can think of and just freestyle dancing to the loudest music? Return to tradition. The Puritans took this from us. What point am I making? I have no idea, but neither do people making the religious argument. Thank you, Kowalski. Omega says, Brandon forgot Shang Tsung, Your Soul is Mine. Emma, please do this in your best villain voice. After reading...
Oh, I said Shao Kahn. That's 100% my fault. It is Shang Tsung.
Okay, gotcha.
What's Shao Kahn from?
Shao Kahn is the guy who is from Mortal Kombat, but he's the big bad. He's the one who's like Raiden's half brother in the movie who wears the skull mask.
Okay. And
Yeah,
then
you can
Shang
see why I
Tsung's the
might
guy
get
from
those
the
names
first one,
confused. It's been a while since I've watched the Lyndon Ashby version of Mortal Kombat.
Right.
Right. It's a good thing you didn't say Goro.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not a casual.
Bingo Dango, Musk is tweeting about how the protesters that took down the American flag should be deported to Gaza because of course he is. Oh, did we just lose Binder? All right, we did, but we're wrapping up soon. So, just tell Binder tell him go check out the scam economy and all that good stuff.
Wait,
and do
she also killed some horses last week. Is this true?
I don't know, but I'm trying to wrap up the show, so we'll maybe just bookmark that for another time.
There'll be another murder soon.
Golden Oyster Cult. I appreciate your interview with Schuyler Mitchell today, especially because yesterday I was given from a friend, no less, the Gaza throws LGBT people off the rooftop speech, and I'm reaching my limit. Anybody who says that shit is telling on themselves. They are telling you without saying it explicitly that they absolutely endorse genocide against people given the right circumstances.
Yes.
They are telling you that they think genocide is a valid tool and they are fine with it being wielded. People who say this are bad people, period. But unlike them, I don't think they should be genocided for it.
I mean, the proportion. I mean, you know what's worse than homophobically throwing somebody off of a roof is to drive a bomb into a building, collapsing all 8 floors on top of hundreds of people, which Israel does, as they do it every
I would also, I'm trying to wrap up, I would also just add, like, those people who make that excuse are just generally trying to find excuses for genocide, and they've just settled on this one. Yep. You know, they're trying to find a reason why it's okay. Like they don't even get the benefit of being like, oh no, I am in favor of killing homophobes or transphobes. This is a way to justify a killing that they're already in favor of, with some sort of like vague liberal, talking point.
Totally.
Or vague liberalism.
Baron Trump Harkonnen says, unrelated to anything, are we allowed to body shame Amy Schumer after all this? I'm joking, to be clear. I am a 300-pound Baron. Well, I appreciate the joke. You can shame her for anything. I mean, it's like she's still, the fact that she was posting stuff like Arabs are rapists and is still getting recognized and having TV shows.
By Variety, yep.
Yep. The Quarter, Armenia
that got
says,
massively ratioed, I will say.
Oh, it did?
Oh my God.
Good. My favorite part of Breaking Point's premium membership is Crystal and Ryan steamrolling Sagar and Emily. That must be very satisfying. Nott says, plus the parents aren't paying for their college. The kids are in debt and will have nothing to show for that debt and will need to start over elsewhere, adding another semester of loans to their tally. And the kids suffer more for Palestine outside of jail and police brutality. Fetterman's Blood Clot says, you'll never get a career, or you could just get a union job like me and you can inculcate yourself against the revanchist political class trying to gatekeep a decent life for those brave
I've had this, and the UAW has been supporting these protests, but I would like to see these sort of trade unions say, hey, if you have your life ruined by these Zionists who want to not let you graduate, we have a special program that you can get right in, and you'll be attacked like crazy for supporting terrorism or whatever, but it needs to happen to give these kids some kind of a safety net as they're attacked by everyone up to the president of the fucking United States.
5 more, and then we'll get out of here, guys. Congressional baseball fan. I don't have proof, but Kristi Noem has probably put down a working person at her ranch at least once, right? John in T-Burg says, I had to murder my dog. That previous family didn't disclose that the dog was actually Hamas. Have you read my email? Said, I've read even conservative ranchers on X who are super pissed at her over both the dog and the goat, which to me says something.
I don't want to interrupt, but did they say what she was hunting with those dogs? Because it could have been people.
It could have been. Maybe we'll need the full book to come out to make that determination, I think. LFK said, didn't Cruz come to power as part of the Tea Party movement, which got a lot of funding from the Koch network, whose protests are more organic, just seems like a distraction. And the final IM of the day. Dan from Columbus. Do I put the time and effort into training this dog, pay someone to do it for me, or put it down in the gravel pit? Tough decision to make between such equally valid options because I'm a lazy psychopath. All right, guys, great stuff today. Thanks so much for watching and supporting the show. We will see you tomorrow.
Bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want. But I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in. And my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,